I'd like to call to order the February 26, 2019 Truckee Town Council meeting. Judy, may we have the roll call, please?
Yes, Vice Mayor Goodwin?
Here.
Mayor Chairman?
Here.
And Councilmember Pallavi?
Here.
And we will note both Councilmember Klofstad and Councilmember Abrams as absent this evening.
Okay, thank you. All right, and I'd like to ask everyone to please stand and join the council in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, before we get into our full agenda, presentations and discussion items, we have an opportunity. We'll open this up for public comment. If there's anyone who would like to make a comment on anything that is not on the agenda tonight, please step forward and state your name, and you'll have 3 minutes to make your comments.
Hello, my name is Talon Valdez. I'm a Truckee resident since '98. Here, I've never done this before. I've been to a couple meetings, but I'm here with something that's kind of unique, and I'm hoping you guys might be able to help me out with it. I'm in a situation where the Truckee Donner Public Utility is going to shut my power off on March 7th if I don't accept a smart meter. I've been in negotiations with them since August to try to abate the situation. They did offer me an alternative plan, which was gracious of them. The plan would have been to put the meter on the back of my property at my expense. Unfortunately, that's $8,000 approximately to do. So unfortunately, I can't afford that. So on Friday, I had to send them an email stating that I can't accept the plan. Because of that, I got an email on Monday that clearly states if I don't give them information by 5 p.m. on the 6th of March that I accept the meter, they're going to shut my power off. So I don't know if you have any jurisdiction over that, but I've been to their board meetings. I've done everything I can do. I've called the CR Sun. I've talked to Mr. McClintock's office, who they can't help, but they sent me to Brian Dahl's office. I've talked to the CPUC. I've done everything I can think of to do. There's more than just myself as far as a group of people that are opposed to the smart meters being on our homes. They're mainly for health reasons. They're also for other reasons, which I can get into if you'd like. But no one else has gotten this deep into it with them. But I'm sure it's going to be the next step for those other people as well, because they're adamant about not offering an opt-out. And without the opt-out, there's really not much choice other than to have the meter on my house or go without power. And that's not a realistic option, obviously, in Truckee. So I just wanted to come to you and first off tell the public that that's what's happening and see if there's any help that I can get from you guys in either discussing the topic with them or I don't know exactly how that interagency stuff works, but I know that you're an elected body and so are they. The problem is they don't really respond to us. Only their assistant manager responds to us. The board members, other than as of this morning, have not responded to a single email or voicemail that we've sent. And it's not just me, it's a bunch of other people in the community that also have the same issue. And all we want is the opt-out. We're not saying you can't go roll out the program. We just want to have the choice to not have a radio transmitter on our home that can't be turned off. That's the biggest issue. You know, my cell phone's in my pocket right now. It's on airplane mode on purpose. My Wi-Fi gets turned off when we don't use it. I have the ability to do all of those things. With this smart meter, I don't have that ability. And it's a health issue and a health concern. So I just wanted to see if there's a way that you guys would have any ability to help that out. I don't want to go without power, so obviously. Plus, my other question then would be, if I do go without power, are you going to condemn my house because I don't have power? Or I don't know how that works either. So just wanted to at least address it with you and see if there's any help I can get.
Okay, thank you, Talon. I appreciate you bringing this to our attention. So just to clarify, so the town of Truckee has no jurisdiction over the Truckee Donner Public Utility District. We don't manage electricity. We don't manage power directly. Some cities do offer full service, including water, power, sewer, those kinds of things. But Truckee incorporated relatively late, and a lot of special districts were already in place, including the electric company here in Truckee, and along with I think it's Liberty Utilities as well that serves a portion of our town. So I think the best advice is to continue to try and work it out directly with Truckee Donner PUD. Have you been to their board?
I have, and
Okay.
Unfortunately, I've had numerous other people as well that have the same issue have gone, and it's on. I mean, to communicate with you is pretty cool, but they don't communicate with us in any way, shape, or form. They just simply politely listen to you and then leave it at that. They don't respond to emails or anything. So
Well, you probably know the general manager there. Sounds like you're talking to the assistant manager. I would just encourage you to keep trying. And I don't know, Jeff, is there anything that we can do from a town level? I'm not sure there is, but
Certainly nothing formal that we could do. I mean, like, we could make an informal inquiry, but I don't know that our voice will be any heard any differently, because, as I think the mayor has said, exactly where our jurisdiction stops. But
yeah.
Yeah, and they're obviously a monopoly too, which makes it kind of an issue because I don't have another choice. It's either them or I don't get power, and that's not realistic in our community. So
Yeah, well, Talon, we wish you well and hope that you can work it out directly with them.
Thank you for your time.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. Any other public comment? Okay, seeing none, we'll close public comment, and we're going to move on to presentations. And Doug Goodell, looks like you're here. All right, we're going to, if you want to join me at the podium. Good to see you. All right, camera's right there.
Oh yeah,
See the blue light? Okay. Well, glad you could make it tonight, and we wanted to take this opportunity to thank you for your service as a planning commissioner. I think you joined in 2015, correct?
sounds about right.
Structural engineer by background?
Yep.
Okay, well, got a little bit here to honor you. So Doug served as a planning commissioner for 2 years following time spent on the Historic Preservation Advisory Commission as a commissioner. Background in structural engineering and interest in giving back to the community, he tackled complicated projects with a balanced perspective. In his years of service, Doug participated in decision-making and recommendations on a variety of significant projects, policies, and regulations, and some of those included, this is probably your favorite, development code amendments, right? Wasn't that one of your favorites? Okay. Rail yard parking management plan, streetscape plan, development agreement, the cannabis dialogue, changes to the town's workforce and inclusionary housing policies, the dependable tow project, Martis Valley Quarry 5-year review, high altitude fitness, Coldstream affordable housing, and grocery stores.
Some grocery
stores. Yeah. So again, thank you for your service, and I think we've got something here for you. It is a key to the town of Truckee. You can try this out in multiple locks throughout town and see what happens. But please join me in recognizing Doug for his service. Thank you. Did you want to say anything, or you're welcome?
No, but just thanks. It was a pleasure.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, while you're coming back to get your seat, I meant to say it about Seth at our last meeting, but also to Doug as well. I served with both of them for a couple of years, and it was a pleasure, and they both did a really great job, and it was great to get to know Doug. And at that level, we're friends outside of here, so it was a pleasure serving with him. And yeah, he was always just really balanced and spot on and really direct with all your comments. So thanks for all you did, Doug, and thanks for the support the whole way. So good job. Thank you.
Thank you, Doug. Thank you. Okay, and I think what we're going to do, we're going to go through the presentations, and we'll open them all up for public comment at the end. So next up, we've got Becky. You're queued up, Becky. Going to introduce a new engineering technician, Cindy Steele.
That's right. Thank you very much. I am pleased to introduce Cindy, our new engineering technician, Cindy Steele. Cindy, maybe if you want to stand up just so folks can see. Cindy was born and raised in Oregon, and she came to the area to attend UNR, where she got a bachelor degree in civil engineering, and that's where she met her partner, Sandy, and they both graduated at the same time. Cindy's worked at, which I guess is who is right there. Cindy worked for a civil engineering consulting firm in Reno after she graduated, and Sandy currently works actually for Lynchpin Structural Engineering. He actually works for Mr. Gatto, who was just recognized. So they moved to, it's a small town. They moved to Truckee in November of last year, bought a home in Prosser Lakeview. Cindy is a very active person. She likes to do all the outdoor activities that we like to do. Her favorite pastime is hiking, so you can often find her out in the woods on trails with her dogs, Red and Silo. Is that how you say it? Short for silhouette or silo?
We say silo.
Silo, okay. And she also has a cat, Sugar. And one of her favorite hikes is Mount Lola, and she plans to do some exploring this summer to check out some new hikes. She's also enrolled in an MBA program at UNR right now, and she also already passed her national 8-hour professional engineering exam last year. So, as you may tell from everything I've just told you, she's extremely qualified for the job, and we're ecstatic to have her on our team. And so we're very happy to have her and hope you will join me in welcoming her.
Thank you, Cindy, and welcome to the town of Truckee. Anything you want to add or say?
Just thank you for the opportunity to serve the community.
Thank you. All right. Jeff, you've got an announcement.
I do. Yes, we have an incentive award, an employee incentive award, and for those who aren't aware, every quarter we hold an all-employee quarterly meeting, which is somewhat unusual in towns, but we're still small enough we can do that, and very often many of our employees come, and it's a great meeting. And at that meeting, we try to recognize one or several employees who either during that quarter or in the recent past has done something extraordinary. We feel all of our employees do great work, but it's nice to recognize that extraordinary, and we give a tangible incentive award to kind of make it something special. And I'm pleased we have one from this quarter, and I'm unfortunately not going to be able to embarrass that person because she isn't here. But Nicole Casey received an Excellence Award, or Incentive Award. And I typically read these so I don't get it wrong. But basically, our agency, the Town of Truckee Financial Services Department, was awarded a CSMFO, don't ask me. It's actually the California Society of Municipal Finance Officers Budget Award. Now that may sound like, budget awards, but it's a pretty big deal. This is a major professional organization statewide, and they announced that our 2018-19 annual budget received an award of excellence. This award represents a continued commitment of the town of Truckee to follow best practices in budget preparation. In order to receive the award, the town had to satisfy the organization's guidelines for effective and excellent budget presentation. The guidelines are designed to assess how well the town's budget serves as a policy tool, a financial plan, an operations guide, and a communications device, which is a tall order for a very thick document full of numbers. And Nicole was certainly the leader of a great team. There are others, of course, who contributed, but Nicole was the leader of that team and did a great job. So we recognize Nicole with an incentive award, and hopefully she'll get embarrassed later.
All right. Thank you, Jeff. And Nicole, I know you're watching out there, so congratulations. Thank you. Great job. Drew Jack, looks like you're...
one sentence introduction for Drew. It's kind of makes sense that Cindy Steele, who is taking that job, is also here tonight. Drew moved into our position running our Geographic Information Systems program. This is a program that has been coming on and improving and evolving and emerging over the last couple of years in the town. But Drew has taken it kind of to a new level, and we think he's going to keep taking it to a new level. And we just wanted to share with you very quickly some of the tools that are out there, and particularly the tools that the community can have immediate access to and get to use.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor, council members. Thanks, Jeff. I want to briefly go through what a GIS is. Typically, if you know what GIS is, you associate it with kind of physical geography, so topography, hydrology, but it's much more than that. It's really analysis, data analysis. It's a framework for gathering data, for analyzing data, for communicating to the public, for looking at patterns of that data. And so just keep that picture on the right in your heads when we're going through the presentation. It's kind of showing at the bottom we have a spreadsheet, and I love spreadsheets, and you can't love GIS if you don't love spreadsheets. So each of those layers is really a spreadsheet. So if it's a street, there's a street name, and then it has a bunch of attributes behind it. So here's the same spreadsheet with the geo-referenced points of those signs in this case. And when you start to put it on a map, you can really see patterns and do other spatial analysis that you can't really do through just a spreadsheet. Even though it is data analysis, now I'm just going to go into mapping, which is what most people think GIS is exclusively. I want to highlight at least 3 of these applications that have been published on the town website, starting with the My Town of Truckee map. It's very similar to the My Nevada County, My Neighborhood map. It's a, let's see, where's my mouse? It's a map that really shows all of the town asset information, zoning, stormwater infrastructure, roads. It's all available to the public. So it loads up with the town parcel layers. What's really nice is, I'll just put in, sorry, Rainbow Drive. I'm going to pick on you tonight. So you can put in an address or an APN. It'll zoom into the parcel. You have full assessor parcel information, a link to the Nevada County parcel assessor's office. And if that particular parcel had a building permit or building permit history, you can actually just click on that and it'll take you directly to any permit history that's on record. So it's a great way for the public to actually quickly view any permit history on their parcel. You can also, if you don't like the bland topography, you can click on imagery. This is the layer list, so these are all the spreadsheets. And you can kind of go through, let's say the public wants to see how to get to a trail. You can go down, click on the trails. You can see what those trails actually mean. So it looks like if I'm living here, I could jump on a bike route, go down to a multi-use path, and end up, in town. So it's very useful just for kind of route finding. If you're a developer, you might be interested in what the zoning might be for a particular parcel. So that those layers are there as well. So you can click on a parcel and then see the zoning district. I guess one of the other big advantages of this viewer is the print function, which sounds pretty basic, but it allows the public to zoom in a parcel, display the parcel information, and say if they want to do a driveway modification, you can sketch on the map the modification, and it'll actually print a PDF with a standard template that we've set up. So the communication is consistent between town staff and the public, which is really nice. We're all working from the same data. So we as town staff can kind of be confident in what they're submitting. So I think that's a huge advantage to the public. Let's see, this was a big one. You might have seen a Nixle that went out earlier, which jammed up the mapping server and really screwed up this map. I think we had like 2,000 hits on the map at one time. And so I've hopefully tweaked it a little bit. But this is the snow load map. So we're going to pick on Rainbow Drive again. It's very simple. Oh, we get Donner Lake Road this time. It just zooms to the parcel. You can see the APN address, the elevation that's used to determine the ground snow load, and then the ground snow load. Very simple, but it again saves time and money for developers that are submitting projects and have to either talk to building division to get a snow load, or they come up with a snow load, building division reviews it, maybe it's not the one that they would like to have seen on that project, and they have to go through the review process again, or the design process again. So it does really save time and money, hopefully. The last one is kind of a draft form of a very simple zoning map. But again, this is one that I think is extremely advantageous to have. if you've seen zoning maps that we have published, they're PDFs, and so it's really hard to find a particular parcel. With this, same thing, you can enter in a address. Oh, that's a boring one. Let's go over to here. We'll pick on somewhere over near Rainbow again. So you can see the parcel, the zoning district, if there's any overlay districts, and then of course it links back to the boring PDF map as well. Sorry, planning. So here's an example of a parcel that might have an overlay district as well. So it's just very user-friendly. You don't have to guess where you are in that PDF map. Those are the highlights. There's a lot more on the table, a lot more coming. You've seen the trail map. I won't go through that. But yeah, I'm hoping to get feedback from the public, produce things that are usable and help staff and the public. And it's exciting. I'm excited about it. So thanks for the opportunity to show you.
And just to one thing to add, it's really an all-department function. Originally, it kind of started out, engineering kind of took the lead with getting into GIS and probably still is ahead of the game, but then planning got into it, but where police is getting involved and finance will get involved. We have internal uses of this GIS analytics tool that you can just imagine what kind of things we can do, and we're slowly going to be rolling those out as departments need it.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. I did want to highlight that again, that this is a town-wide effort. All of that data is really from Public Works, engineering, and planning. You know, I just push buttons and bring it together. So it's really their effort that's made those possible. So thank you.
Thank you, Drew. Incredible tool. Want to maybe open for any questions from council?
I think it's great.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's really good. Thank you. Yeah.
Good. All right. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Very impressed.
Yep. All right. And again, we'll open all of these up for public comment at the end. We have one more presentation, and this is Hillary Hobbs with an update on the work of the Sister City Committee.
All right. We'll keep this brief, but we wanted to give you an update on the exciting work that our new Sister City Committee has been doing. About a year ago, our now Mayor, David Tierman, expressed an interest in starting a Sister City program for Truckee. So last May, Council directed staff to begin the process of exploring that, to join an organization called Sister Cities International, and to establish a Sister City Committee, and appointed David Tierman to be the council rep on that committee. So in response to that, we put out a application for community interest in joining that committee, and ended up with a great committee of 5 community members, including David Tierman, and we have one other community member here tonight, and that is Nicholas Sealchen, if you want to say hello. Our committee has met 6 times over the past several months. And the committee first began by discussing their interests in forming a Sister City program for Truckee and developing a mission statement to guide that process. The committee then developed criteria to consider in seeking sister cities, and those included looking at mountain towns, particularly ones that are destinations for outdoor recreation and tourism, similar to Truckee, communities of a similar size to Truckee, and then some other characteristics of interest included possibly Olympic heritage, similar topography, including rivers and lakes that are important parts of the community, and communities that are dealing with some similar challenges to Truckee, including housing and diversifying a tourism-based economy. With these criteria in mind, the committee members went out and did a whole bunch of research, looking sort of worldwide, asking their friends and family on what are some communities that you would be interested in visiting, or getting different ideas, and came back with a long list and a bunch of research that they had put together on each of those cities. And then they narrowed that down to their top 6 that they wanted to further explore and reach out to. And then from there, it's sort of like a Match.com type situation where you're like reaching out and trying to see if there's interest from another city, and then you'll hear back from them. So it's we've been sort of initiating that process with each of these cities and hoping that they'll choose us too. And those cities, we'll go through in alphabetical order, so not necessarily order of preference, are Albertville, France, Canmore, Canada, Lillehammer, Norway, Pucón, Chile, Vevey, Switzerland, and Zakopane, Poland. So where we are in the process is in January and February, we sent out introduction letters to these 6 different cities, introducing Truckee and our community, expressing our interest in exploring a partnership and explaining what a sister city is. Many of them already have at least one existing sister city relationship. We've started to get responses. We've had some communication with 3 of the cities that we've reached out to. And as a next step, we anticipate the committee will keep communicating with these cities, and through that communication come up with a recommendation, which we'll bring back to council. The way the process works is a sister city is generally sort of declared by signatures from the highest ranking official of each of the cities. So we would have our mayor and that city's mayor or similar position sign a MOU or an agreement to establish that relationship. We've already had some community member interest in this program, but we're in the early stages, and we anticipate broader community engagement once we have something more concrete to get excited about in a specific city, to getting the word out and starting to talk with other community organizations about what types of partnerships we might build from here. So that is it for our update. I'm sure Mayor Tierman might have some things to add, and open to any questions.
Thank you, Hillary. No, just I think the committee has really been enjoying the work and the outreach to other communities elsewhere in the world, and it's exciting that we've gotten response back from 3 of the 6. Hopefully, we get more beyond that, and yeah, I think hopefully this year we'll be coming back with a recommendation. So thank you, and thank you, Nicholas, for your work, and. If the others are watching at home, thank you. So open this up for council questions, all the presentations. Any other comments or questions?
I mean, have the responses been positive? Do they like us?
I think we have some good energy going back and forth with these potential cities, yes.
Okay, good. I just got a little self-conscious there for a second. And I know we talked a little bit about doing some more outreach within our community about this process. Has that been able to happen yet as we're moving forward?
We haven't done a large outreach campaign. We do intend to provide some updates to groups like the Chamber of Commerce in the coming months. And again, once we have something more concrete in a specific city selected, I think that'll help us build some more momentum with that.
Great. Thank you.
Is there, what do we do? Is there like a formal thing that you do once you have a sister city? I'm just curious what it actually entails.
It can take many different forms. It's pretty flexible, and it really depends on what our community is interested in, what their community is interested in. Often it can involve exchanges with school students going over to their city, or hosting students here. It can involve exchanges with all different types of groups, maybe arts groups. Some of it can be virtual exchanges, sending over, pen pal messages or an art exhibit, things like that. We already have had some interest, for example, from the Truckee River Watershed Council on working with a sister community that also has rivers and is dealing with watershed restoration and learning from one another. So it can take sort of more technical exchange forms like that as well.
Yeah, for another example, the town of Canmore went through a public art master plan process not that long ago and sent a copy of their master plan and policy. Then I need to get to Nick Martin so we can share that. So things like that, opportunity to share and learn from each other. So.
Having spent some time in Pucón, Chile, I highly recommend that town. It's a great place. That's the only one I know, though, so, I'm biased.
The lobbying begins.
All right. Okay. All right. So with that, I thank you again, Hillary. I think we'll open all of the presentations up to public comment. If there's any public comment on any of the presentations, please step forward. All right. Oh, Jeff. Yes, Jeff has not public comment on the presentations, but you have some other public comment.
I do. If no one's coming to the podium, I'll take this quick opportunity. Just wanted to highlight for council and really for the community over the last couple of months, Truckee has figured quite prominently in at least 3, there may be others, but 3 that we're aware of, kind of regional and even national publications that are pretty significant. And I just thought we'd point that out. It's always nice to recognize when you get recognized. One of them is Western City, which is the magazine that all cities sort of ascribe to, 500 or so of us almost. And what it does is this one, it's a multi-page spread. I don't know if we want to, I don't know how this is going to look on camera, but it recognizes the Minnie Mouse Hole project and the award that we got for that and the kind of the project and the process. Quite a nice spread. The second publication is Comstock's magazine of the Sacramento region, but it's really Sacramento and well beyond, including Sierra. And this was in the January 2019 issue, all about housing. And we actually got this amazing 2-page color picture of Coburn Crossing being constructed. The article itself is actually about can local fee adjustments affect the affordable housing question. And because we have done some work on fees, and so is the Mountain Housing Council, we got figured prominently there, which is pretty fun. And then finally, a national magazine, Good Old Planning, because we planners love planning. In this one, Truckee doesn't figure so prominently, but 2 of our colleagues and citizens do. There's an article on planning's role in wildfire mitigation, following all the fires, written by these 2 gentlemen named Tony Lashbrook and Norb Zurich. So Kim Zurich's husband, Norb, who was a retired firefighter, and of course Tony, who used to sit here for a few years. So anyway, pretty good recognition and kind of fun stuff, and all for positive, useful things, I would argue.
We've been getting some recognition from the Weather Channel too.
Yeah.
Getting an award in it.
Thank you, Jeff. Great to see that press in a variety of publications. So appreciate you bringing that to our attention. Okay, so I think we had closed public comment on the presentations, and we're going to move on to our consent calendar. Consent calendar tonight, we've got 4 items. Item 6.1 is the minutes of the February 12th closed session and regular meetings of the Truckee Town Council. Item 6.2, tax deferred member contributions pursuant to Internal Revenue Code 414H2. Item 6.3, tax defer employer paid contributions pursuant to Internal Revenue Code 414H2 as well. And item 6.4, an engineering services contract amendment with Eastern Sierra Engineering and budget amendment for Reach 4 and Upper Reach 5 Trout Creek Restoration Project, CIP 1705. All right, any member of council care to pull an item? Staff? Any member of the public care to have an item pulled? All right, seeing none, entertain a motion to approve the consent calendar.
Move the consent calendar.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay. Consent calendar passes. And then this brings us to our first discussion item of the evening, item 7.1, public hearing to accept the closeout for the Community Development Block Grant Standard Agreement 15 CDBG 10566, whatever that means.
It's really a formality. So I did not prepare a PowerPoint presentation for you. The requirement is really to hold a public hearing in case there is any public comment that anyone would like to submit regarding the closeout. But this is from the 15-16 allocation that we had. We funded micro enterprise loans. We did assistance that we worked with SBC on for sort of business growth and development. We funded a first-time homebuyers loan and a business assistance loan. So the money went to good use, and Joanne, who does our grants administration, is looking to close everything out as far as that specific CDBG grant. That's it.
Okay. Any questions from council?
And, well, sort of more of the public information side of things, but I think that the partnership with the Sierra Business Council in administering this as part of their ongoing support is, I find that they have a really incredible set of resources for small businesses in general that are generally not as widely known as they might be. So if whatever help this little plug gets them, I think that's a good use of our time.
No questions.
Okay. So Councilmember Abrams had sent an email, or she's not here, but one of the questions she had, I'll go ahead and relay. I sort of had the same question. Was the program overall considered a success? I think part of it was wondering, with only one homeowner taking advantage,
This is the first time that we've done this specific breakout. So I think looking at it from that perspective, yes, it's a success. I know that we added in the money to do the first-time homebuyers assistance, and even one right now I think is a success. And if you look back at 15 and 16, home prices were still high. So ideally we'd like to have more. But again, kind of working with our partner organizations like Sierra Business Council, there are other options now to still continue the first-time homebuyers program. So opening up doors for more people to get into that program. So I would say yes, it's a success. As we do these more and more, we hope to get more participation. But for now, I think it's a good starting point.
Yeah. Thank you.
I guess I do have a quick question. Was it a flat sum grant, Danielle, or was it just sort of like as we needed, we had funds that we were able to tap into? And if it was a flat sum, did we use all the money?
I knew you were going to ask me that. I didn't have a chance to look at the exact numbers for it, but it kind of, for the business part of it, it depended on what the specific business needs were, because we had some criteria set out about how much the business was putting in versus the town putting in. And so there was some different breakouts for that. So, I mean, it could have varied between something very small, like $8,000, kind of up from that. So overall, we spent around less than $100,000, I think, total with that. So I think the way that the grant was structured is there was a cap within it, but we were able to work with the different businesses to allocate as needed.
All right. Any other council questions? All right. So we're going to open this public hearing up to public comment. Anyone wishing to speak in support or opposition of the action, please step forward. Okay, seeing no public comment, we'll close public comment. Bring it back to council for any deliberation or a motion.
Give you a motion unless anybody has anything else they want to bring up.
Sounds good.
Recommend action to accept the closeout for the CDBG Standard Agreement 15-CDBG-10566.
Second.
All right, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All right. Motion carries. Next up, item 7.2, Envision Donner Pass Road, Envision DPR Corridor Improvement Project, Western Segment Corridor Report and Eastern Segment Memorandum. And Scott, looks like you're queued up.
Thank you, Mayor and council members. I'm Scott Mathat, the Associate Engineer for the town of Truckee, as well as the project manager for currently all of the Envision DPR projects that we are currently working on. So tonight I'll be presenting on the Western Segment Corridor Report and the Eastern Segment Memorandum. So a brief background would be that the Envision DPR project is the section of Donner Pass Road from Coldstream Road through 89 South down to the MacGyver Roundabout. We're taking a multi-phase design and construction approach to the project as a whole. And overall goals are to improve the aesthetics and to enhance the pedestrian, bicycle, and vehicle facilities along the corridor, kind of to enhance the multimodal aspect of the corridor. In 2015, Council authorized the town manager to enter into a design contract with Mark Thomas and Company to develop an overall corridor planning document for the Envision DPR project. If you take a look at the upper left-hand corner of the screen, that's the western segment. The blue line would be Donner Pass Road, kind of down by the state park in Coldstream Road on the west-hand side, traveling all the way down to 89 South. So that's western segment that we analyze, and then the eastern segment is from that point all the way to the MacGyver Roundabout, where it meets up with Brickletown Phase 2. Some existing Donner Pass Road conditions, obviously summertime, not now. The kind of all of them are showing the existing shoulder condition of Donner Pass Road, some of it being a pretty wide 8-foot paved shoulder that's used for anything from cars just pulling over to people walking, cars parking, so it's kind of a full use, not really a designated use of any sort. At the bottom, there's some curb and gutter that needs to be replaced. Again, no sidewalks there in that section. And then the upper right-hand corner would be some paved, just asphalt concrete sidewalks in the section there by Zano's Pizza. So we did a primary focused corridor study, was on the western segment, and the reason for that was to meet some key project milestones. The town was awarded a $1.5 million Highway Safety Improvement Program grant back in 2015, and so in order to meet that grant, the grant was given to the town, or granted to the town, to fill in sidewalk gaps in the western segment. It was actually a further direction from council to look at the eastern segment as part of the project. So to hit those goals of hitting the milestones of getting the grant funding, we focused on the western segment. And because of that, we haven't done as detailed of an analysis on the eastern segment yet. Our plan would be to do a similar analysis of the eastern segment and roll out subsequent phase projects as well for that section. So the memo kind of summarizes the eastern segment, while the more hearty report kind of memorializes the western segment. So since 2015, we've conducted significant community outreach through multiple platforms, Truckee Thursdays events, Big Truck Day, multiple council meetings, as well as individual community outreach meetings that have been held here at council chambers. We've completed a CEQA, so a California Environmental Quality Act, and a NEPA, National Environmental Protection Agency processes, and gone through those and adopted a mitigated negative declaration for the project. We have also worked on forming a long-term maintenance assessment district for the western segment of the corridor, which was voted on by the property owners. We've developed preliminary plans for multiple projects, as well as full design plans for several projects per council direction. The utilities on the western segment have been undergrounded. The facilities are in place currently. You still see overhead lines currently in place, but all the facilities are now in the ground, ready for the utility providers to start pulling their cables and removing the poles, hopefully early summer of this year. And that's in preparation for the sidewalk and crosswalk improvement project that's currently out to bid, that we'll be constructing this summer as well. So during the community outreach, this is kind of just an example of one of the questions that we kind of asked the community of what do you envision Donner Pass Road to look like? So you can see there are the 3 different images. One on the left is so there's medians, there's a lot of landscaping, there's sidewalks, obviously bike lanes. The middle one is a little bit of landscaping, sidewalks, not as much medians, and then the far right would be just sidewalks on the sides of the road just to fulfill the grant requirements. Over there to the right hand side you can see the summary that really high community percentage towards simulation 2, which would be some form of landscaping to beautify the corridor and improve the aesthetics, while also improving the multimodal approach with the sidewalks there as well. There's also kind of overwhelming support for implementation of roundabouts, which really just enhanced the existing the general plan goal of or general plan policy of replacing intersection traffic signals with roundabouts when appropriate. So. And so what we were looking at was to see what is the community supporting at this time. Roundabouts continually scored well, minor landscaping, kind of to summarize, and then to improve the existing sidewalks as needed along the corridor. Some of the key discussion points that we looked at during the outreach, emergency vehicle access, that was pretty much top of our list. So we've been working with the fire department as well as the police department to make sure that we're providing improvements that they're comfortable with to still provide emergency access all throughout town. Sidewalks, crosswalks, landscaping, both major and minor intersection roundabouts. So I'll get into that a little bit further, as well as medians. We looked at both small pedestrian refuge islands, kind of like what's in front of the hospital, as well as full-length medians. We looked at both options. Significant support for the crosswalk, sidewalks, landscaping, and the major intersection roundabouts. The minor intersection roundabouts, there's a lot of concern with those, as well as the medians, especially for business owners worried about traffic in and out of their businesses and access to their sites. And so when we look at those in the future, those will be more community outreach, and it'd be council direction at that time if we want to pursue those projects. This was one of the exhibits that we had in this room during one of our public meetings, and we asked community members we did dot surveys, and so we gave community members sticky dots, and they went up and they put their dots on whichever phases they felt should be first priority down to last priority, and they had numbers on them. So you can kind of see on the left, you'll see a roundabout at Coldstream Road and Donner Pass Road and the I-80 interchange there. The yellow just to the east of that would be the other I-80 interchange. Just to the east of that, kind of in pink, is one of the minor intersection roundabouts, which would be proposed at Highway Road. The blue and orange there are a combination of new sidewalks and widening existing sidewalks. The green roundabout in the middle is the Northwoods roundabout, kind of following down to the other 2 pink roundabouts, one at Donner Trail Road by the PUD, and then one at Meadow Way by 7-Eleven Backcountry, Mountain Comfort Furnishings, and then all the way at the far east end of the project, the blue roundabout would be at Frady's Lane, Donner Pass, or 89 South Donner Pass Road intersection. This exhibit didn't make its way into the Western Segment Report, so at the end of the presentation, I'll be adding on an additional recommendation to council to include this in the report, because staff feels that it's important to memorialize this, that we looked at all of these different options and that they were kind of weighed by the community. The summary of the weighting of those is within the document, but this specific exhibit was left out, so we'd like to include it.
Scott, one additional comment on this, because you may be asking, what's up with all the small roundabouts, and what this option was looking at was if one end of the spectrum is the existing roadway and the lack of pedestrian facilities and streetscape amenities, this would represent the other end of that spectrum in terms of a kind of maximized, robust project that would add a lot of streetscape features, add a lot of opportunities for landscaping, add a lot of traffic calming. The reason for the smaller roundabouts is they would facilitate the installation of a continuous median on Donner Pass Road, which the continuous median was of concern to many in the public in terms of how that may limit access, to and from businesses. The notion with the small roundabouts was really twofold. One, that it provides opportunities for U-turns. So if you had a continuous median on Donner Pass Road and you wanted to make a left turn into a business, you wouldn't be able to do that, but you'd be able to go to a roundabout just up the street and make a U-turn there to access that business on the other side of the street. The thinking was that, the distance between the major intersections that would have roundabouts for traffic handling purposes, like at Frady's and Donner Pass Road and 89 South and Northwoods Boulevard and Donner Pass Road, was that distance was too great to expect people to reasonably travel that distance to make a U-turn and have to drive the length of the corridor twice. So that was that, along with the opportunity to use roundabouts as traffic calming features and a way to break up the mass of the street, if you will, was the reason this option was looked at. As Scott is about to point out, there were some concerns with the continuous medians as well as the smaller roundabouts that combined with the fact that we don't have anywhere near the budget to accomplish all of this in the near term, made it fairly straightforward from a staff standpoint to kind of back off on those continuous medians, back off on the smaller roundabouts, look at a more modest project, recognizing that future councils or future budgeting processes could always choose to fill in more of this kind of an option should they choose to in the future. So.
Yeah, thanks for adding that, Dan. Good points. So to kind of segue right into what Dan was just describing, so we kind of took all of that community feedback and really started looking at some key projects that we felt the community held highly and per council direction that as a town that we wanted to pursue. So you'll kind of see the same two major intersection roundabouts to the west, Northwoods roundabout in the middle, and then Frady's Lane roundabout to the right. The minor intersection roundabouts are taken out and the full-length continuous medians are removed. You'll see small green blotches in the middle of the roadway. Those are pedestrian refuge islands at kind of key locations, mainly in front of the schools. So there's one in front of the elementary school, and then several there in front of the high school, as well as some strategic crossing locations where a significant amount of the high school children cross during lunchtime. So this is a realistic build out. Not all of these projects are currently budgeted for, but there's several of them. The sidewalk project, so the green line work in there, that is the phase 1 project, so that'll be being constructed this summer. And then the Northwoods roundabout will be constructed next summer. We're currently in the design phase for that. And then the Coldstream roundabout is kind of developer driven of the Coldstream property there. So kind of to summarize, funded, we've got the Northwoods roundabout funded, I-80 Coldstream, Western Segment Phase 1, the corridor report, which I'm currently presenting on now, and then the Western Segment Utility Undergrounding Project. There's 2 unfunded CIP projects currently in the budget. One is for pretty much what the Western Segment Phase 1 was, so it's just pedestrian and crosswalk, sidewalk and crosswalk improvements for the Eastern Segment that will kind of come after a similar Eastern Segment corridor analysis for that section, as well as an unfunded utility undergrounding project which would come before the sidewalk project. So tonight, per the staff report, the recommendation is to adopt Resolution 2019-06 and accept the Envision DPR Corridor Improvement Project Western Segment Corridor Report and the Eastern Segment Memorandum for guidance in future land use approvals and capital improvement projects, so both on the private and the public side. The additional recommendation tonight, as I pointed out earlier, would be for council to direct staff to add the corridor map shown in the presentation on slide 11 and for staff to provide additional information regarding design efforts for all of the potential projects considered in the report. we really focused on the ones that gained community input. But we'd like to add, obviously, the corridor map that was shown in the presentation, as well as a few other points to those maybe lesser voted on projects.
All right. Thank you, Scott. Thorough presentation. Open this up for council questions.
Yeah, thank you, Scott. There's a huge amount of work here, years and hundreds of people's input. I think my biggest question is if there are still additional questions about some of the more specific design elements of this. It looks like there's phases of what those contracts are going to be. I'm guessing it's because we're going out to bid for the sidewalks and the kind of pedestrian refuges. That's set. And then in terms of the Northwoods roundabout, we still have not finished the design for that yet. So if people wanted to comment on that, there's still potentially time to open that up.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's always time, even for the phase one project, if a community member or council member had some kind of comment on something that they saw was blatantly wrong with the plans, or we're always open ears to questions on that, and happy to incorporate if need be, even during construction if it had to happen. And again, the Northwoods Roundabout, we're at about 30% design right now, so plenty of time to still gather feedback on that. We did a presentation up in for the Tahoe Donner Association a few months back about the Northwoods Roundabout and gathered a lot of good input from that meeting. So I imagine we'll do another similar public meeting in the near future.
But adopting this plan is by no means saying that process is closed.
That's correct. The resolution really kind of memorializes both of the documents as they're there for guidance and reference for us to use, for us to utilize to benefit the corridor, but by no means locks either the public or the private into following exactly what is in the document. It'll ultimately be up to council and town engineer, town manager to decide.
Yeah. Yeah, for what it's worth, the comment on the Northwoods Roundabout was the benefits that you currently have from having both a kind of continue west on Donner Pass Road lane of travel and a separate right turn up Northwoods lane of travel. And if those two are condensed into one in the roundabout, there's concerns of congestion there. And I'm not quite sure how you fix that given the limited space.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I'm happy to go into it now if need be. So currently there's, I don't know the exact dimension, but there's a few hundred feet of right-hand turn lane there to travel up Northwoods. So the approach going into the roundabout from the east will be wide enough to where, if necessary, there could be two lanes opened up to where one could travel up Northwoods and one could continue straight through the roundabout. So we've been looking at similar things with that with the police department, the fire department, to, if need be, to open up that some kind of slip lane if that was necessary. It could be accommodated in that approach.
I would add though, that is a design detail that needs to be finalized in terms of, is it permanently set up as two lanes? There's some pros and cons of that, or is it permanently set up as one lane that in an emergency type situation could be coned to become two lanes? And there's kind of a fundamental difference in option A versus option B there that remains to be finalized.
But not something we're finalizing tonight.
Correct.
That's perfect place to leave that one.
Dave, anything?
What's the timeline on the eastern segment sort of envision process getting kicked off?
Sure. So I believe it's fiscal year 2021. We have in the proposed budget a few $100,000 for the design work on that. So that would be the first approach. And then in kind of subsequent years, likely followed by undergrounding first. If we take the same approach that we took on the western segment, undergrounding first, some kind of sidewalk improvement project shortly thereafter, and then potentially roundabouts, anything else after that. So early 2020s.
Cool. Thank you. It was a really good presentation as well, and I appreciate the level of detail, and I do appreciate the sort of compromise you landed on there with the pedestrian islands or similar, rather than going with full median. I know that I was at some of those meetings, and yeah, it was an interesting conversation for sure. So I think that's a good balance. My only other real quick question is, I was just, when I was reading through the actual corridor improvement plan, I just noticed they submitted it to us back in June of 2018, and you guys are bringing it to us in February of 2019. So I was just wondering kind of what happened in that timeline, and why is it coming back now versus, why? Yeah.
Yeah, good question. That would be just staff workload during the fall, because I'm the project manager for all of the Envision DPR projects. We were kind of in the thick of it with the undergrounding project, and I'm just getting back around to it to get it up in front of everyone today. So
that's why you get the hot seat on 2 agenda items tonight. So there you go. All right. Thank you. That's all I have.
All right. So Scott, this coming summer, I know it's in the report. What are we going to see this summer?
So the utility poles and the overhead utility lines will be removed, and then we'll have new sidewalks and crosswalk improvements by winter of this year.
Okay. Yeah. And my only other comment is the report was incredibly thorough. I mean, it was lengthy, thorough, and I thought covered everything in a lot of detail. So appreciated that. Is there such a metric as how many roundabouts per capita? Is there such a thing? I mean, how do we stand in that?
I think Bend, Oregon has us beat, but we're catching up.
Okay, good to know. Maybe
council goals 2019.
That's right. Okay, so we'll go ahead and open this item up. Oh,
one more.
Yep.
Scott, is just talking landscaping. Is this tree in the presentation representative of the proposed?
That is actually
It's an art tree.
Yeah, it is. It's one of our art trees in our roundabouts.
Modeled after our flowers. Yeah.
No, these are for just representative purposes only.
Okay. Any other council questions, comments? So we'll open this up for public comment. Any public comment on this item? Seeing none, we'll close public comment, bring it back to council for discussion or motion.
Sure.
Yeah.
You want me to keep it going? Where are we? We're on 7.2. I will make a motion to adopt resolution 2019-06 and accept the Envision DPR Corridor Improvement Project, Western Segment Corridor Report, and Eastern Segment Memorandum for guidance and future land use approvals and capital improvement projects, in addition to the additional recommendation on the slide in front of us.
And I'll second that and also say, great work, Scott.
Yep. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right. Motion carries. Thank you again, Scott.
Thank you.
And I believe you're up as well for this next item, right? 7.3. And this is the budget amendment relating to the Western Segment Utility Undergrounding Project.
Yeah, so this is the first of the described projects from the previous presentation, the Western Segment Utility Undergrounding Project, which we commenced in July of last year, and a majority of it is finished up before the winter this year. This is for the budget amendment for the rest of the construction project, as I'll get into. Council awarded the project to C&D contractors for a little under $2.7 million with a 10% contingency. We're then staff coordinated with the utility reimbursement agreements with Truckee Donner Public Utility District, AT&T, and Suddenlink, which is now Altice, to fund a significant portion of that, a little over $3 million. The partnership costs just under $2 million for the town. This included drainage work as well as civil infrastructure for the electric utility per an agreement that staff worked out with Truckee Donner PUD per council direction. little over 150,000 for the TDPUD for some of their work, a little bit under 300,000 for AT&T, and almost 650,000 for Altice's work. The town invoiced the utility providers throughout construction to be paid on a progress invoice standpoint. There's a few just very minor items that still need to be completed, about 2% of the overall project. Underground and utility service connections at 5 of the properties that needs to occur after the utility providers pull their cables, so they haven't done so yet. So C&D contractors will be coming back to do that work, as well as there's a few punch list items that the Truckee Donner Public Utility District has asked to be complete to finish their system continuity. So during construction, there was many changes here and there that resulted in about $67,000 of additional costs, not all of which are to the town, just in general, $67,000. There was additional conduit in the designed trenches, unforeseen trenches that needed to be constructed, some additional potholing of existing utilities to make sure that our contractor wasn't punching holes in anything or getting into trouble, and then some other unanticipated costs along the way. Field obstructions and coordination with existing utilities. Donner Pass Road is just a matrix of existing utilities, active and abandoned. So that was fun for our contractor to have to coordinate and work around, as well as some large boulders that were run into in a few of the trenches that had to be excavated. Some final system continuity additions to make sure that the utility providers were able to really pull their wires down and have the same system that they had that was above ground. But a significant amount of the increased cost, a significant amount of the $67,000, about 90% is actually reimbursed by the utility providers. So in the staff report, it was a little bit more complex of a budget amendment, but this is, I've simplified it a bit here to make it a little bit easier to digest. On the left-hand side in gray is the total project costs per the adopted fiscal year 18-19 budget. It's about $2.5 million of general fund, $850,000 for utility reimbursement, and then about $550,000 for Measure V sales tax going towards the drainage improvements. So the proposed budget amendment for the total project costs actually reduces the town's funds in green and then kind of summarized in blue to the right by about $250,000 there. The utility reimbursement, theirs was a little bit larger than what they had originally anticipated, so their cost went up by about $250,000. And then the Measure V sales tax, those improvements that are applicable under Measure V sales tax actually increased by about $25,000. And what this did was the total budgeted project costs went up by about $13,000. So that's the reason for the budget amendment here. But obviously the general fund and the Measure V sales tax for the town combined, the town costs actually went down. So staff recommendation would be to authorize an additional. There was originally a 10% contingency, so there would be an additional 2.5% project contingency for $67,066 for the construction contract with C&D contractors. What this would do is to authorize the town engineer to approve contract change orders or changes to unit quantities within the approved contingency amount for a total authorized contract amount of $3,030,000, and to authorize the budget amendment outlined in the staff report to increase the CIP C1815 fiscal year 18-19 construction funding from $2.8 million to $3,160,000 as outlined in the staff report. Happy to answer any questions.
Any questions? All right. So just for me, just to clarify, the last bullet point, it's talking about a $360,000 budget increase, yet the prior slide is talking about a $13,000 difference. So could you just clarify that?
Yeah, absolutely. So the $2.8 million came from updating some estimated actuals from the prior year, where we had originally budgeted to spend more in construction before June 30th of last year, and ended up actually all of the construction happening after June 30th. So the updated estimated actuals were less than what we had anticipated, and so that's where the 360 delta comes from.
So one slide represented total project funding over multiple years, and then one set of numbers. This set of numbers represents the most recent year.
Okay.
Yep.
Got it. Thank you. Thank you for clarifying. Okay, any other council questions? We'll open this up for public comment. Seeing none, we'll close public comment, bring this back to council for deliberation or motion.
Well, I just say, again, great work on the general fund difference and as well as the utility providers' contribution. So I know the overall amount of money invested in the undergrounding has always given me pause, and I'm glad to see that it's trending in the right direction as we get closer to the end.
Dave? Okay.
And with that, I would move the staff recommendation.
Second.
All right, all in favor of the staff recommendation on the screen in front of us? Aye.
Aye.
Okay, carries. Thank you. Thank you, Scott. Great work.
Something about not reading every word.
Okay. Next up, we have item 7.4, Truckee Artist Lofts, town recommitment of the $1.65 million deferred interest loan. And this is at the downtown extension of the Rail Yard Mixed Use Development Master Plan. And I think, Danielle, you're up.
Great, thanks, Council. I wish we had more people here tonight, but I think that's attributed to the weather, not because of the topic that we have in front of you. I'm going to go through some slides, and then we also have Rick Holliday and Jason Hansford here, and they'll cover some things that I don't get in my presentation. We tried to coordinate a little bit so we don't give you some overlap. So let's jump in. In the staff report, I have a little bit more background than I included in these slides, but I think some of that is just because I want to make sure that I give adequate time for Rick and Jason to talk about this project in a little bit more detail. But as you all know, the Artist Lofts project has been a project that was entitled within the Rail Yard Master Plan area since 2015. It's an affordable housing project, a for-rent product that has varied slightly since we first approved it, depending on what type of financing package the development team's been looking at. And part of that is really just due to construction costs and some other circumstances with the project, but not for lack of interest in pursuing the project. So I want to be clear that although we're talking about a 9% tax credit application that the development team is working on, they are also working on other options, and it's really just to ensure that they're getting the best finance package put together and are able to deliver the best product for Truckee, the best housing project, the best design, the best compatibility with the Rail Yard Master Plan, and that's really at the root of this. There is a significant team that has been pulled together to make this project happen. We are one small portion of that, including the staff, and I just want to kind of reiterate that it's monumental to get these affordable housing projects moving forward. So as part of this 9% tax credit application that the development team is pursuing, which is due by March 4th, we have kind of put this in front of you as quickly as we could, although it does seem a little bit last minute. Really to recommit the $1.65 million that the town had previously committed for funding. And that's one portion of their funding package. There are multiple other funding sources that are included within this, but in order to make the application whole, they need the town's commitment to be able to do that. What I thought would be helpful is just to show big picture, sort of the history of where we were and where we are now. So as you can see, there were 3 other 9% applications that the development team had put together. And those are competitive applications. And the difference between 1 point can make the difference between an application getting funded or not. And so kind of looking at that history, the development team switched to the 4% tax credit application because it's not competitive. But that does require additional funding input on their part, where the 9% is really just a better financing deal. There's more state money put into it, and it allows projects to have more amenities, sort of a better overall financing package within that. But if you get into more of the specifics about, yes, the town has kind of fluctuated a little bit in how much funding commitment we've put in, there's still been this is an affordable housing project. So there has always been the majority of the project dedicated to affordability, and it has an artist preference, but that doesn't mean that there aren't other options for people to be able to rent within the project. What I think is interesting about this slide, most notably, is that although we're back to a 76 units of affordable housing, one manager's unit, which is a market rate unit, if you look at the bedroom numbers with this current proposal, there's actually an increase in the number of bedrooms. And that's been sort of a difference in how we've talked about affordable housing in the past of, is it unit type or is it number of bedrooms? But if you're looking at housing people, the bedroom count is pretty important. So I think that's important to look at the increase that's proposed with this current proposal. Specifically, what does that look like? And I will note the staff report table 4 had a slight error because I tabulated the 30% and 40% AMI and it came up as 2 at the bottom. They should say 8 at the bottom. So if you were running numbers, you probably saw that as an error. But I think it's helpful for us to kind of look at this range of affordability that's still being proposed. And because the council is looking at a commitment of the funding tied to the affordability mix, this is the mix that you would be committing the funding to. If there were any changes to this mix, it would have to come back to the council for you to reconsider whether or not you wanted to commit the $1.65 million specifically for the affordability changes. So there are no longer any market rate units or moderate income units that are proposed. That was done with the 4% tax credit application, but wasn't really part of the mix with the previous 9% applications. And a lot of that is attributed to the application itself, that there are very specific criteria for both affordability and unit types that the state drives to try and really capture what are the hardest income levels to house, which are, you'll see a 30% in here, that's extremely low income. And I just looked up the numbers for that for Nevada County for 2018. Extremely low would be a household of 4, making just over $25,000. So that's really not a market that Truckee's been able to capture much of. So that is something that would be an opportunity with this funding mix. And then it starts to vary depending on how you go from there up all the way up to the 80% of area median income. And I use this with some of my previous presentations to kind of show, well, what does that look like for the town as far as what our funding is? Because I think, obviously, we'd like to have good bang for our buck, but I think part of it, too, is just checking and seeing what those numbers are. And with this current proposal, if you go to kind of a bedroom level, it's still very affordable. Even if you go to the per unit, it's very affordable. $21,000 of sort of town subsidy per unit really goes a long way in a project like this. So the other thing I thought would be helpful is to kind of revisit what sort of housing money we have and where this money is coming from. So thanks to Chrissy for this morning providing me some updated numbers. So these are accurate. These include even our polling dollars that we had just recently approved to look at other affordable housing funding sources. So this is very up to date as of this morning to kind of show that the 1.65 is a planned allotment for the artist lofts that we had already programmed in. And even with the allocation of that, the money that we have for Coburn Crossing, there's still remaining availability of just around $850,000 in our housing fund that we can use. What's interesting about the tax credit applications is the town is providing a loan if this is something that the council chooses to reallocate. And as the project's built and then there's rent coming in, they'll pay their bills. And then once it starts to get cash flow, that money comes back to the town. So if you project that out based on the formulas, it's, I think, around year 13 where the town would start to get money paid back. That would go back into this funding sources for us to use for other projects. So it's very short and sweet. I know I kind of summarized a lot of information quickly within that, but I think it's important to hear the other aspects that Rick and Jason are going to talk about. ultimately, the council's decision in front of you tonight is, do you want to authorize the town manager to provide a letter to the development team, which would recommit the town to the $1.65 million low-interest deferred loan? And then I kind of give you the summary of what that looks like. It's 55-year commitment. It's specific to the 9% tax credit award. It's paid back to the town with the residual receipts when there's adequate cash flow. And also kind of with a limited commitment term within that. And that's what the council's done with all the previous applications. Should the development team also want to do the 4% application, we set that up to be a different process for you to review. So it's really to try and focus on this 9% right now. We did let the time frame go for 2 cycles so they can do the March application and then the one following it also. Jeff, did you? No, I was done. Yeah.
Are you going to turn it over to?
I was going to turn it over. Yeah.
Before we turn over to our esteemed colleagues from the rail yard, I just wanted to recognize Danielle's part here. These great slides and staff report kind of comes to you and you see it and it seems like all the other ones, but literally the information on which this is based came to us about 6 hours after the deadline for staff reports had expired. And somehow magically the next morning all this information appeared in a well-written staff report. So just want to recognize the extra efforts there. I mean, it in part just goes to the way you do business, but also our commitment to this project.
I will add to that, though, too, that CFY provided a lot of the information that I included in the staff report, which made my life a lot easier. So that's when I say we're part of a team. I'm part of their team in a lot of ways in the way that we're sharing information and we're able to kind of pull this, even if it seems last minute, we can pull it off because we work well together. Rick, it's all you. Let me pull up Jason's presentation.
Been a long time since There we go. Is that better? Thank you. Sorry, it's been quite a while since I've had the opportunity to talk to you. David, I haven't seen you on the council, so welcome. I want to second what Jeff said about Danielle. On February the 7th, Tony Lashbrook asked me to suffer the indignity of having to go down to Stanford University and talk about the rail yard's 15-year history. Now, Tony doesn't have anything particularly to do with Stanford, but they were holding a symposium. Every time I get on that campus, I get the shakes because I went to Cal, and it's very painful. We have 9 big games in a row that we've lost, and there's just all kinds of tragedy. But I did go down there, and what it did is sort of an interesting thing for me on a personal level. It forced me to really look at the 15-year experience that we had. Sometimes that's sort of painful to look at, and sometimes it's sort of rewarding and fulfilling because I did commit, I wouldn't quit, and I think we're still there. And I can look at Danielle, and she was quite young when I first met her, and she didn't have a child quite yet. But in 2009, I think, is when she was ready to give her firstborn child. Dan Wilkins, I think, he's not here now, but I can't count the amount of times he rolled his eyes and said, "You will never get UP to do any of those things." And David, I knew you as well, so as a developer. So it's nice to be back in 15 years and really talking about taking a building vertical. It's just really fulfilling. I need to recognize that. On sort of a humorous note, I went by the rail yard today just sort of admiring some of Jason's work. Some of you may have noticed, the CPUC crossings did happen. There's a lot of skepticism there, and I'm pleased to report they finally happened. Union Pacific, you all know, has moved completely, and 100% new balloon track, which has been very necessary of late. And the train cars that were sort of strewn around the site, I think Jason Hansford maybe could go to the Middle East and do some good work because he managed to find a consensus for the 2 cars to be saved, to get them placed, and to start to plan a park. Some of you may not be aware that we spent about $1 million drilling a tube underneath the rail yard, underneath the railroad tracks, to get some important utility connections to the rail yard this summer. And most notably, the swoosh is gone. Some people have come to me and said, "Jesus, now I understand what you were talking about." So it is time to go vertical. And that moment with Tony gave me the opportunity to really reflect on a lot of what went down the last 15 years. And again, I think Jeff and Danielle turned on a dime that I didn't think was possible with public partners. So to both of you, I think Jeff was in your office 2 weeks ago. I do think that if we can get this application in with this letter and extension, we're inside the 5-yard line. I think we may punch it in this time. We have the right partner for this project in CFY. They would be here tonight. Cyrus Yousefi is one of the most tough people I've ever known. He's suffered the loss of his son. We know that. He's looked me in the eye and crying at his son's funeral and says, Rick, we're finishing this. We're going to do it right. So I do believe that we will get funded. This 9% funding will give us the budget that I think will get to the building we want. I also want to thank the people that were willing to take some pretty rough sketches about 8 or 9 months ago when we thought we might be able to push the 4% credit through. Those aren't very inspiring sketches. I've heard that from many of my friends. I appreciate the confidence that we were not going to just produce those sketches. I do think that Danielle can affirm that the building that we're planning will be met with enthusiasm, and the design review we think should be a public review in April. And it's a process that I'm confident and is in a good place now, and I'd like to give anybody interested the opportunity to take a look and look at how we refine this and make it right. I'll sort of close by saying that I hope people do have confidence in the buildings that Nancy and I want to create. The only building we have to really show for our effort is the building we did in the downtown during the depths of recession when nobody would lend us $1. We did do that with our own monies, and we did it with the intent to show that Truckee Funk is possible. And I do think that the building we're going to build as the artist building will continue that effort. The sketch that was done 9 or 10 months ago, I do actually almost need to publicly apologize for. It gives me a little heartburn when I look at it, but it was part of a strategy to try to get us to the money. So I'm here more to thank everybody for the confidence, because I kind of can't believe you said okay. But it's very serious. At this point, I really would like to let Jason take the CFY presentation that they wanted to do tonight. I told them to stay home. The pass was too crazy. Cyrus goes, forget it, I'll get up there. I said, no. So Jason and I would like to sort of give you a flavor of the slides they had prepared and answer any of your questions.
Thank you, Rick. Thank you, council members. It's great to be here tonight. This is like a tennis match, it feels like. Where is the ball at the moment? Behind us, we did meet in 2015 and talked about an affordable housing project called Artist Lofts with Ollie, and that was, it seemed like a big venture then to be talking about how do we build housing when we don't even have a project yet. And here we have a project and infrastructure in place ready to support it, and yet we're trying to figure out the final strategy of how we get this implemented. So, as Rick relayed here in the slide, we have the red box. That's the Artist Loft Housing site. We have all the roads and supporting infrastructure in place, and that was substantially completed this year, or actually last year. And then this summer we'll do landscaping and some minor amenities, and moving forward on phase 2. So. Why are we here? We've done 3 applications for a 9% tax credit. We were unsuccessful in those. Still staying true to our goals and objectives, went for a 4% tax credit application. We were awarded that, put together some other funding sources, and we're pretty excited. Had a project, actually made a building application, and I think we were almost to the 90% level of actually having a building permit, and started getting some feedback on construction costs and found that we had a deficiency of about $7.5 million on a $20 million project. That is a big, big gap. And fortunately, we have Rick, who's an advocate for how do you do housing more efficiently, and Factory OS stepped up to the plate with our design team and CFY and said, how do we take this podium with conventional construction above that? How do we reinvent that with modular construction and try to get some savings there that we can make sure that this project happens? We were able to scratch out about $2.5 million savings through that process, and CFY was fairly confident they would be able to get some home funds in the tune of about $5 million. We actually made that application, and we were notified, we were expecting that in December. We were actually notified on January 31st that we would not be receiving that. Danielle relayed the how competitive these grants are. I think on a 1,060 point scale, we lost by 6 points for the $5 million. So recognizing that, brought in our design team, Lowney Architecture, trying to really revamp how do you do modular, how do we do it better. And so what you're seeing on the slide above us, that's what we came before. We took the Artist Lofts, which was a concrete podium with 3 stories of stick framing above that, came up with a modular component of that, reduced some of the parking, reduced the back shape of the U, and this is what we saw at the commission meeting last summer. We can go to the next one. So here's, again, talking about our home funds that we were not able to receive. I think we can go to the next one. So why a 9% tax credit? Why are we so bullish today when we weren't successful 3 other times? One, we got Section 8 vouchers that help augment the rents for the units. There have been some state monies that have been allocated towards affordable housing, and there have been some more favorable regulation regarding rural communities. We are very bullish with this application that we will be awarded successfully. And the great push for getting March 4th, why the urgency? We'd like to see this go vertical this summer. So that's why we're here tonight. We think we can get there. And one of the things, meeting with Ollie's dad as well as John Cicerone and Ollie's wife as well, we do remain true to our vision of a workforce multi-use artist community. We still think we have a great project here and still want to envision all the life that you see at the wall project in Sacramento, as well as Ollie's vision for the project itself. We did get a fair bit of comment from the architecture, as Rick had relayed. The application we brought before you was a 90-unit project. With the 9% tax credit, there's a 25% requirement for 3 bedrooms. There's a 25% requirement of 2 bedrooms. And that's how you fit those in. You reduce the unit count to 77. We're able to fit this in the same footprint. We got lots of dialogue from the Architectural Review Committee. We engaged that, took that seriously, and our architects actually took that to heart, and we made a presentation to town staff, I guess, 3 or 4 weeks ago. And this is kind of the building that you're seeing in the lower section of this slide here. You can see some of the comments from the Architectural Review Committee, and I think we have actually a building that is more satisfactory than any of the versions we've seen to date. This is kind of an evolution. On the upper left, you'll see the original Artist Loft project. On the right, you'll see what we saw last summer, and then down below, you'll see the project that we're envisioning for modular construction for the site. Again, kind of a before and after between the 2 visions that you saw last session for the Planning Commission saw more specifically. And as you can see, we're adding a lot more character to this building, and I think it's true to the character of Truckee. And if you have any questions, there are more slides if we need to get into that, but I think really the emphasis here is that we are at the 5-yard line. We'd like to see the project go vertical this summer. We are bullish that we will get awarded in March. or make our application in March, know within about 30 days of that. The next application cycle is in July, so we still have another strategy, but right now we want to make sure we get this thing going this summer. And if you have any questions, I'm here to answer those.
All right. Thank you, Jason, and thank you, Rick. Really appreciate the overview, and Danielle as well for pulling that together so quickly. So I'll open this up for council questions.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure. I actually don't have too many questions. I was just going to disclose I had some back and forth with Danielle. I had the opportunity to talk to Jason as well during the day today, and get some of my more specific questions answered, just as to, especially on the design and kind of where we came from and how we got to where we are, especially with regarding to the 100% affordability. So those were just some of my questions. When we get into deliberation, I can elaborate if you'd like. But most of my questions were answered at that point, and I'm happy with sort of where we've come, so I don't have any formal questions at this point.
Thank you, Dave.
Yeah, thank you again for the great both history and pushing it forward for all parties. Also got to sit down with Rick this afternoon and go over some of the numbers and some of the kind of maneuverings of this in more detail, which I found really helpful. Thank you. I actually have a general question that I think in all the rush of details and information on this I've never actually really answered before, which is on a project like this, what does the 9% equate to in dollars? Like how much of a contribution, how much of a difference is that actually for between the 4% and the 9%?
The way the federal government subsidizes housing is very irrational. That's all. State that as a foundation. What happens is the government allows investors to get a credit against their taxes if they contribute money to affordable housing. And a 9% credit is more valuable than a 4% credit by that number. The way the credit is calculated is they take the cost of the project and what's called the eligible cost. And over a 10-year period, you get 9% per year for 10 years to cover that. So there's a 90% subsidy of what they allow to be subsidized. They don't allow land to be subsidized, certain design costs, certain hard costs they do. It's a very complicated set of formulas. I could probably be up here for a long time explaining it. But the root of it is corporations pay a lot of taxes, buy these credits, and that's the capital that provides the subsidy. The subsidy is about a little more than twice as effective with the 9% as the 4%. That's why 4% tax credit projects have higher rents and sometimes are on more constrained budgets to build a project. I don't know if that answered it.
No, it does. So just to restate it, so it makes it far more likely and cheaper for private capital to fund this project.
Yeah.
Because those private investors are getting
the thing that I'm excited about on a personal level, and I talked to Cyrus, the 9% credit will probably give us a large enough access to the 9% monies so that we can do the interiors of the community spaces and finish out and fit out the spaces better. We might have had to have warm shells with the 4% credit.
One more for you, Rick, if you want to. The other thing I found helpful was just thinking through that the different income mix, because previously the affordable was up to 60%, and now we've gone up to 80% for some of those. That's all sort of dictated from the state, saying you must do this kind of mix.
Yes and no. The federal credits are basically governed by federal rules. In the Tax Act that was passed last December, it was huge. It included some modifications to the affordable housing rules that allowed the tax credit rents to go up to 80% if there was some balancing. So that allows us to do 12 units at 80%, which is getting closer to where market is. for this project, which the project got to be jiggered more like the 4% deal with 9 market rate units. I hope that, yeah.
Yeah, great. Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay. Yeah, just maybe a couple of questions and a few comments. I really appreciate I know we're here tonight really to re-endorse the town commitment in terms of the funding for the 9% application, but I very much appreciate the update on the architecture as well, and pleased to hear that there'll be other opportunities coming forward in that regard. And I agree. I think the improvements are definitely a positive step in a great direction. So glad to see that. I did want to ask in terms of timing, assuming this is successful, and you're hoping to break ground this summer. Are documents that far along, permit type documents, construction documents?
In my development experience, I've never quite met anyone like Rick Holliday who goes, if you build it, they will come. So yes, we are well along in documents, and we almost 3 weeks ago we were talking about a 990 unit mix. Now we're at the 77. We have Title 24 going. We have all the MEP drawings going. We have all the structural drawings going. The factory's looking at this, so we are well along in that process. And knock on wood, we're going to get an application in here soon and get awarded this grant. So
excellent. Thanks.
Can I just?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Commercial?
Yeah.
Most people think, he thinks I'm crazy. We have Autodesk as a partner in our factory. Many people know AutoCAD. It was a radically life-changing program. Revit was a very big changing program. We have Autodesk as a very, very active partner, which is allowing us to take a lot of digital data and convert it much faster than it's ever been done. And because of that, we're on track for the drawings.
Excellent.
Thanks.
Excellent. Okay. I don't think I had any other questions. I think at this point we'll open this up for public comment.
I think I'm the only member of the public here, as usual. Hi, it's Susie Turney.
Hey, Susie.
I want to reiterate also that I'm thrilled by the exterior redesign. I was one of the public that commented that it didn't look great before, so it looks much better now. I'm also excited about the higher percentage of multiple bedrooms. That is also good news for our families in town. This other part's a little bit more complex, but just doing a lot of reading lately about walkable cities and how we are trying to design our cities to be more functional for all of our participants. There's a Jeff Speck book about rules for walkable cities, and so he talks a lot about inclusionary housing as one of the sections. And he mentions that inclusionary should always have a wide range of incomes. And so I see that this has a wider range of incomes now, which I think is great. I don't know if there's a way to, it sounds like it would disqualify you from what you're trying to go for the fiscal benefit. But I just like to quote he had in there where he says, it's generally not income diversity, but the concentration of poverty that leads to social pathologies. And so I just want to keep that in mind as we move forward, that we're trying to have a wide range of all incomes. And that's all I got. Thank you.
Thank you, Susie. I think you were our first public comment of the entire evening tonight, so I appreciate that. Okay. Any other public comment? Okay, we'll close public comment and bring this back to council for deliberation or a motion.
So I'll start it out, and really what I want to say is thank you, because at the Planning Commission, if you remember, I was one of the commissioners who was fairly strong-willed and adamant about getting this through, even though we did have some heartburn on the design. So thank you for saving my face and coming back with some upgraded designs. I think it's really important, and it helps us feel a lot better about this signature project that we're committing significant funding to. To Susie's comment, I also take that to heart greatly, because the original project we were sold on back in 2015, or however long we've been talking about this, had a large mix of incomes, and due to the 9% tax credit and different requirements of all of this grant funding, we are where we are today with what's in front of us. And I'm okay with it, and I'm happy about it, because I think what we're going to get is that mix of incomes as we go further into this project. And I think it's important to recognize this is the first step, and it's the first vertical building. So I hold out hope. I'm optimistic. In this game of land use planning, we have to look forward quite a long ways. So I think we will see a greater variety of income levels, and I hope you hold us to it as well as we keep going through this. Thank you also to Danielle, who gave us that really good graphic on the funding request per unit per bedroom. I think for us up here, that at least that helps me put it into perspective when we're charging in lieu housing fees and wondering where that money is always going. It's nice to see that per bedroom fee. So that's a really great stat that I would love to see again. This is my first time seeing it in all of these processes, actually. And I think it tells a better story than a per unit fee sometimes. So that's great. So really, I'm wholeheartedly ready to, make a motion and approve this request in front of us, barring any other deliberation debate by my fellow council members tonight. I think it's incumbent upon us to keep it moving, so I support it.
Thank you, Dave. Morgan?
Yeah, I think I would echo everything that you said, David. I think I would just really underscore and really see this as an opportunity, almost as I don't know, restart, but certainly a big accelerating moment for the partnership that the town and Holiday Development has in getting this project done. We've got a lot of work to do to make the rail yard a reality still ahead of us. But if this is a turn towards a higher momentum, that's I think the way that we've gotten to this point on this particular piece will hopefully lead to a lot more of these buildings going up and people getting places to live and movie theaters getting built and stuff that's not on tonight's agenda. So, but I'm psyched to support this.
Great. I really can't add much more. I mean, I totally agree with my fellow council members. Rick, I really appreciated your 15-year sort of look back in history, and I actually remember even beyond 15 years, maybe 18, 19 years ago, meeting you for the first time. And, all I can add is, really appreciate two things. Number one, the vision. And number two, the perseverance. And those two things are now coming to reality in three dimensions right before our eyes. So incredible partnership and incredible work and lots of hurdles along the way. So fantastic job and looking forward to the future. So thank you. So with that,
let's hope we get this one, right? Yeah. We're going to get this one. So we don't have to have it come back as yet another agenda item. This is my second or third time approving. Anyway, I'll make a motion to approve the recommended action in agenda item 7.4. How's that for brevity?
Enthusiastically second.
All right. All in favor? Aye. Okay. Motion carries. Congratulations. And best of luck. Thank you. Okay, yeah, so what we're going to do, we've got one item left. Thank you, gentlemen, for patiently waiting. We're going to take a 5-minute recess break, and then we'll come back fresh and ready to go. Thank you. Okay, we're going to call our meeting back to order to take up item number 7.5, the appeal of Glasner tentative map denial. Laura or Jeff?
I'm actually going to start briefly and then turn it over to Laura to get into the details of this. But I did want to frame this one a little bit because it's a bit unusual. It's not something that would maybe typically come before council. And I wanted to kind of frame both the policy question at hand and also kind of the process. First of all, it's been a fairly challenging process for a number of reasons. But I wanted to commend both Mr. Glasner's team, who we've worked with very carefully, and our own team for really trying to come up with some creative solutions, frankly, to avoid being here tonight, to be able to come up with some options that would work either for the landowner and or work for the other landowners, the other parcel owners within this small subdivision. We weren't able to do that to all satisfaction, and so we're here before you. But I did want to recognize the multiple attempts by a number of people on both teams to try to make that happen. This might seem on its face a kind of I don't know if minor or small, kind of policy question, because only a couple of lots. We're talking about a single building envelope on a single parcel. But when you really think about it, it actually does have some significance. Obviously, to the landowner, incredibly significant. It's a piece of property that one puts one's heart and one's soul and a great deal of time and effort and money into, and you want to get it right and get it perfect. It makes absolute sense why it's important there. And equally, it's important from a town policy perspective. We have a whole bunch of policies in our general plan and our development code that look at this concept of clustering specific buildings, usually it's single-family housing, to allow for large pieces of open space to achieve some objective. And this is not at all uncommon. In fact, the notion of clustering in rural subdivisions, there have been many books written about it. One gentleman named Randall Arendt has actually made his entire career figuring out how to do this well. And in the early days of Truckee, pre-town and early town, it was perhaps a much more important concept because there were a lot of large lot subdivisions kind of coming into their own. Many of those have either been built out or largely built out, and so it's not something that comes before us as often now or as significantly as it might have in the past. But those policies definitely have followed us through. So they're important policies in the history of Truckee's general planning policies. And I just wanted to show one little picture. That wasn't the one. It's coming. There it is, which I can claim to actually have drawn, although I didn't make it really beautiful. Laura did. But what I want to do is kind of conceptually explain this notion of clustering, because what happens in the real world is you get real parcel lines and building envelopes and some of the little sketches in the general plan, and they don't really quite tell a clear story. So I wanted to tell a clear story with a somewhat, I would guess, exaggerated version of why one even worries about this notion of clustering building envelopes. And this would show, in theory, 4 lots and a approved or building envelope for each of those, designed to be very clustered in one area so that all of the buildings would be relatively tight to allow large swaths of open space or natural habitat or view shed to remain open and yet still be in private property ownership, not have to be in some public ownership or conservation easements or something like that. And that's the concept behind clustering. And it's usually designed to protect a view shed, protect a important wildlife corridor sometimes for migration, a particular vegetation type or habitat. There's usually a reason for it, and in this case, the reason I think is largely view shed, the reason that we're before you on this one. And of course, that second picture just suggests, well, if you take one or several of these building envelopes and put it somewhere else, perhaps for extremely good reasons for that individual landowner, it does change the concept considerably. And so I just wanted to show that because I think we get, it's the concept on which those general plan policies are built for good or ill. Having said that, I'm going to turn it over to Laura now to go through the particulars of this application. This was just meant as kind of a, I don't know, project clustering tutorial 101.
Sorry, PowerPoint decided to take a break there. Good evening, Mayor and council members. As Jeff explained, we're here tonight to talk about the Glasner tentative map denial appeal application. Council's role in this is to review the appeal application. The appellant is asking basically the council to overturn the Planning Commission's denial of the project, which took place on June 19th, and to approve the tentative map application that they had proposed. So you'll be the final decision maker. So whether you decide to approve or deny the map, you'll need to make findings to support either of those actions. This project, to give you a little history, started with a preliminary application. That was back in March 2018. That was back when we first started talking with the property owner about the possibility of relocating the building envelope. So a pre-app was submitted. We reviewed that. We provided feedback on the clustering and felt that Planning Commission wouldn't be able to make the findings to approve that relocation as they were requesting. The formal application was submitted in May 2018. The applicant at that time basically was requesting a formal determination on the building envelope relocation from the Planning Commission. So that application requested that the building envelope be relocated approximately 350 feet towards the western property boundary, reduce the golf course setbacks that were recorded on the map from 150 feet to 50 feet for structures and 100 feet to 30 feet for patios and decks. Under the development code, we have very limited discretion on changes we can make at the staff level. So in general, if there's changes to a tentative map, that's required to go back to the original review authority for a new map. So that's why this went back to the Planning Commission. And the types of changes that were proposed in this application were not the types that we were able to make as staff. At the Planning Commission hearing, there is a unanimous vote 4-0 to adopt the resolution that denied the project. That was based on the finding that they could not make the general plan consistency findings. Those are some of the policies that were cited in support of that action. And the appellant filed their appeal on July 2nd. We originally scheduled it in October, but there were some scheduling complications with the appellant's schedule, so we rescheduled it to tonight. So some project overview. This is the location out on Horizon Drive. We'll have some graphics that zoom in more so you'll be able to get a better idea. The background of the project is in 2004, the tentative map was approved by the Planning Commission, and in 2007, the subdivision map was recorded. That created a 3-parcel subdivision with one remainder parcel that had an existing residence on it at the time. So you can see the configuration of those 4 parcels. The large one there is the remainder parcel. As part of that, building envelopes were established on each of those parcels. They ranged from 1/2 acre to 2.1 acres on that remainder parcel. And they also established those golf course setbacks that I referred to before. So this is an aerial showing the property. You can see the residents there on the remainder piece and the locations of the recorded building envelopes there on the right. As part of that approval, the Planning Commission found that the map was consistent with the general plan policies for clustered residential development and made some findings regarding the grouping of the building envelopes close to the road to reduce disturbance, cluster future homes closer to the existing residents on that remainder piece, and provide a buffer between the residential development in Airport Flats and Old Greenwood, and to maintain some permanent open space that was consistent with the land use designation, which is open space recreation. The current property owner purchased property in May 2017, and when they began looking at how to design the residence, they felt that it was preferable to move that building envelope closer to the rear of the property. So that would require a building envelope relocation and reduction of those setbacks that were recorded on the map. For development code consistency, the tentative map findings require that the proposed subdivision has to be consistent with the Subdivision Map Act, General Plan, Development Code, other applicable plans. The site has to be physically suitable for the density and intensity of development. There have to be adequate provisions for access and utility services, and the map has to be compliant with CEQA. So under the initial approval, the 96 General Plan was in effect and the 2001 Development Code. The amendments to that map would be reviewed under the current General Plan and Development Code. So for Development Code consistency, we also looked at the open space clustering requirements, which are intended to maintain undeveloped open space areas and protect environmentally sensitive areas. There's a 90% open space requirement that's still in effect. And there's some guidelines for the design criteria. There's some flexibility built into that if there's site-specific characteristics that should be taken into consideration. And as always, the guidelines can be balanced if there's another more important goal or guideline that the review authority feels takes precedence. There's also a number of goals identified in the development code, including that the large open space areas should be contiguous and there should be continuity and connections between the open space areas and residential development. Another area that we looked at was tree preservation and grading. We don't have policies that restrict those on single-family residences when there's a building permit that the tree removal and grading is approved through. So we don't really have a way to monitor or restrict what tree removal is done on a single-family parcel. And while the general plan does recognize that trees are really important to our character, it doesn't prioritize those over other goals that the town has. So land use goal LU7, this is where in the general plan it starts to talk about different land use designations and what types of clustering is appropriate in each type. So in the open space recreation land use designation, the rural suburban cluster is identified, and it's said that that should be implemented to avoid rural sprawl. There have been questions from the appellant about whether the rural suburban cluster is the appropriate type of clustering or if a rural cluster is more appropriate. So one of the things we talked about at the Planning Commission hearing was that the types of clustering are applied based on the land use designation, not on the number of parcels within a subdivision. And it clearly shows that for resource conservation, you apply residential cluster. For open space recreation, you apply the rural suburban cluster type of clustering. So, like I said, those are applied across the entire land use designation, and within the rural suburban cluster, the things that are important with that are that the structures are clustered close to the road, leaving large undeveloped areas at the rear of the parcels, and providing a continuous open space area throughout the subdivision. This shows the existing location of the building envelopes and that contiguous open space area. And then if that one building envelope were to be moved, how that would affect that open space that's existing. This is an example of another rural subdivision that was approved in the same land use designation, the open space recreation. As you can see, this is out by Piping Rock. There's the road there, building envelopes are clustered along there, and then you have this large open space area at the rear. And within the general plan, there are policies in the land use element, community character element, conservation and open space. Those were talked about in the staff report in a lot of detail, so I won't go into all of those, but we can refer back to this if we need to later. And in terms of the actual appeal application, there were 5 points that the appellant raised. The first was that this project should have been approved at the staff level. And as I mentioned earlier, there are certain changes that can be approved by staff. One is if there's an error or an omission, and the other is if there's new environmental information or have been physical changes to the parcel. Neither of those categories were applicable to this situation. And in that case, the development code says that you have to request a new tentative map if you want to change the characteristics of the subdivision. So based on that, we felt that going back to Planning Commission was the correct approval. The next was that the tentative map findings were inconsistently applied between the 2004 approval and the 2018 approval, and that there was unnecessary analysis done in 2018. The difference between those two reviews was that in 2004, it was determined that the building envelopes were determined to be consistent with the general plan, so a lot of extra analysis wasn't needed to be done. In 2018, when the proposal was to move one of the building envelopes, that created inconsistencies that we felt needed to have further analysis. So that's why there is a difference between those two staff reports. The third item was about general plan consistency, that the proposed building envelope, in their opinion, doesn't reduce clustering, isn't inconsistent with the general plan goals or policies, and doesn't pose a public health or safety impact. Again, those were items that were discussed in a lot of detail in the staff report, so I won't go into great detail here. But ultimately, the Planning Commission found that they couldn't make the findings for general plan consistency, and that was their reasoning for denying the application. The fourth item was that the tentative map findings were appropriately made with the original approval and are still relevant for the revised building envelope location. So we acknowledge that the amount of open space overall is still being maintained, but it would be configured differently without that contiguous uninterrupted open space. And those setbacks were intended to provide a corridor along the rear of the parcels adjacent to the golf course, which worked with that open space. And moving one building envelope would disrupt that, which we didn't feel was consistent with the open space policies. And finally, the appellants believe that the denial was a violation of the Housing Accountability Act. The town attorney reviewed their statements regarding that and determined that the Housing Accountability Act does not apply because the modifications involve just one single-family parcel, which was created through a previous subdivision, and the act applies to housing development projects that have more than one residential unit. And the denial of the map to move the building envelope didn't preclude the property owner from developing the property since they had a previous approval. So they still have a right to build, and there's no impacts to the previously approved density. Also, the commission's denial was based on objective general plan policies regarding clustering. So in the town attorney's opinion, that act is not applicable in this situation. So we received 4 public comment letters on the application. 3 were in support and 1 was in opposition. The McHughes did ask that I mention that they had hoped to be here tonight to give public comment in person, weren't able to make it. Copies of all of those letters were forwarded to you to review prior to the hearing. In addition, there was a letter from the property owner that provided some additional information that was also forwarded to the council. So the recommended action from staff is to deny the appeal and uphold the commission's decision based on the general plan inconsistencies. If you choose to take that action, you would need to adopt Resolution 2019-05, which would deny the application on the basis that the findings can't be made, and that resolution includes findings in support of the denial. There are some alternative actions you could also consider. One would be to approve the appeal overturning Planning Commission's decision. If you want to take that action, then we would need to come back with a revised resolution and revised findings at a future council meeting. And we would recommend that you find the project exempt from CEQA pursuant to section 15061B3. You could also continue the hearing to date and time certain, request additional information from the appellant or staff, and you could also find that CEQA exemption is not appropriate. So to summarize, our recommendation would be to adopt Resolution 2019-05, denying the project on the basis that the required findings cannot be made, and determining the project to be exempt from CEQA per section 15270 of the CEQA guidelines. So I'm happy to answer any questions, and also Rob Wood, the agent for the appellant, has a presentation he'd like to present to you if you'd like to do that now.
Okay, thinking maybe we do the presentation from the applicant and then come back with questions after that. Does that sound okay? All right. And we were handed copies of the slides. There are 54 slides here. So I wanted to ask from a time perspective what you anticipate. I don't think we want to allow for 54 minutes. No, I think I can keep it right around 20 minutes. Okay, 20 minutes. That'd be great. Okay, thank you.
And Mr. Chairman and council members, thank you for being here tonight. My name is Frank Glassner, and after an arduous 9.5-hour drive going up and down 80 and then down 49 and 50 and up 267, I finally made it, but I felt that it was very, very important to be here. I'm actually pretty disappointed to have to be here tonight because historically, to enjoy our land, enjoy our lot, this would have been a staff level change, and history tells us that this would have been a staff level change. We submitted our application. This is the 1-year anniversary now, and staff required us to present a new tentative map when this would typically have been done literally at the window. They wouldn't accept an amended map or a certificate of correction, and then goes the arduous process over the past year. And just to put it in perspective, we have spent $111,000, including bills sent to us by the planners and the town. And we certainly hope it goes to good use, but that's more than 25% of the value of the land itself. Want to stress, we're residents of the town of Truckee, and very proud ones indeed. We're voters. We're taxpayers. We contribute to the community both professionally and holistically. And we want to stay here in Truckee and build our dream home and continue to make Truckee a beautiful, wonderful place it is to live, and make it wonderful for others without having to go through a process like this. So now I'm going to turn this over to our land planner, Rob Wood, to tell a very clear story of both the history and what the process was that we went through, and put a little bit of this building envelope issue in perspective, and hopefully have the council reconsider with a positive decision. Thank you. Rob?
Good evening. Rob Wood, Millennium Planning and Engineering. Thanks for being here tonight. I know the weather's not too great to be out, but appreciate you being here. Also, before I start, I'd just like to say thanks to Jeff for your comments. We did work a lot with staff back and forth to try to resolve this, and for reasons out of our hands and out of their hands, we weren't able to come to an agreement. So that's why we're here tonight. But we did try to work with staff, and we do appreciate it. The only thing I'll comment on the exaggerated version that was shown is it's not, when you do this kind of stuff, it's not a one-size-fits-all. There's some lots are easy to construct on. Some of them are different sizes. Some of them are different zoning. You have different environmental constraints. Every project's different, so you really can't look at just a diagram and simplify it and say this is how everything should look. We didn't have the luxury of 4 identical parcels. We have a 5-acre, 10-acre, and 20-acre parcels, so it's much different, and the code allows a much different. So with that, I appreciate a little bit of extra time, and I'll go through this as quickly as I can. So this showing on the left is the approved, and on the right is the proposed. The only difference is on Lot 2 with the building envelope shifting to the southwest. It's touchy. So this picture was taken from the center of the proposed building envelope. It's south facing. You can see that it's a flat area of the site. There's no trees. There's only 2 trees on the entire building envelope, which wouldn't be impacted. Has a great southern exposure, great place for solar orientation, and great views. This is, as you can see, a great place to build a house. So when we started this process, we first did the research, made sure there wasn't any conflicts with building setbacks. There was no conflicts with easements, no conflicts with environmental constraints. And we spoke to the town about how to proceed, because I've done this in the past, and typically this is done by a certificate of correction. And to move a building envelope. And staff said, well, go ahead and submit a pre-application so we can review it a little bit more closely, get a better idea of how we should proceed. So agreeing with that, we did a pre-application, submitted it in March, and staff, based on the pre-application and the exhibits we had submitted in the project description, they required a new tentative map. We didn't agree with the process, but we went forward and submitted a new tentative map in April. Staff got us on Planning Commission pretty quickly. It was processed pretty quickly. We went to Planning Commission in June and it was denied. And we filed an appeal in late June, early July, and here we are. So 4 things I want to go through quickly tonight were in our appeal justification, first being process. A tentative map is also known as a subdivision. It's used to subdivide property. We're not subdividing property. It's a completely different process when you amend a tentative map versus amending a final map. And that's outlined in the code. There's also a different set of findings that have to be found when you do a tentative map versus a final map. Once a tentative map records, that tentative map doesn't exist anymore. Now it's a final map. So moving on to parcel maps and final maps, there's required information and there's supplemental information. The supplemental information is what we're talking about tonight. Building envelopes, building setbacks, that's supplemental information. That, when you change supplemental information, that's not changing for corrections. Only when you change required information is it considered a correction. So amendments to a parcel map or final map are covered in the government code section, and also there's a town section that I'll go through. So here's the government code section. Quickly, 66434.2 that specifies supplemental information, things like building setback lines, building envelopes would also fit into there. Here's the supplemental map from the from this project, and as you can see, it outlines where the building envelopes are and some other information. It's typically called a supplemental data sheet. On here, it's supplementary information. So then the code section, and this is the Subdivision Map Act. It probably goes without saying, but the Government Code Section 66469. So it talks about. That's hard to see from this far. I'm going to look this direction. That after a map records, it can be amended by a certificate of correction or amending map for these reasons. And the first 3 or 4 reasons are to correct errors. And so staff's correct in there that we are not here to correct an error on the map. But you can't stop there. You can't take it out of context. You have to go down to F, which says to correct any additional information, aka supplemental information, which is pursuant to 66434.2, which I just went over, which is the supplemental information, building envelopes, building setbacks, that sort of thing. So the Town Development Code doesn't differ from the Government Code. It's consistent. It says that in the event that errors are on the map, or other corrections that are necessary. So there's a clear definition and a clear distinction between errors on a map and other corrections that are necessary. Those other corrections that are necessary are your supplemental information, building envelope, building setbacks. So it's really clear in the code between the Government Code and the Development Code. It's very clear on process. So staff's analysis determined that the code section that I just cited does not apply because it was not requested to correct an error or an omission. But as I already went through, that directly conflicts with the Government Code and the town's Development Code. Also, interestingly enough, when this project was approved in 2004, the approved tentative map, you can see parcel 3, that's directly below our parcel that's in question here. That's where it was shown, that's where it was approved. It moved 3 years later before it got recorded, it moved to a different configuration and a slightly different location based on the movement of an easement. The easement there is shown in purple. That's not an uncommon thing. It happens quite often. After an approval, there's minor changes that are made. You find a better way to design it, and during design you realize it makes sense to go over here. Those minor changes happen all the time. They're very common, and they always, 99% of the time, they get handled at staff level. They don't go back to hearing. And in this case, it did. It was a staff level change. It did not go back and require a new tentative map, even though an easement changed and a building envelope changed. So we wanted to be afforded that same opportunity. So to summarize the process, in 2004, an easement was relocated and a building envelope was moved, and it was approved by staff. That was, we believe, the correct process. In 2018, when we came along and tried to relocate a building envelope, staff required a new tentative map. We believe that was the wrong process. And I believe it was clear for the reasons I stated. It conflicts with the government code. It conflicts with the development code. It clearly says that a certificate of correction or amended map is the right process. And also, what ended up happening is it leads us down a path to go to Planning Commission and get denied based on the wrong findings. Because findings are different between a new tentative map and, of course, just doing a certificate of correction. So moving on to inconsistent application of the findings. In 2004, this was approved and found to be consistent with the development code and general plan. And I'll just focus on clustering and open space because I think staff and I agree that we're consistent with everything else in the general plan and development code. It basically came down to clustering and open space. So this is a bunch of stuff to read, but I'll just go through quickly that this was right out of the staff report in 2004, that staff could support the project based on these things. And it was things like location of being contiguous to other large parcels, being next to the golf course, one dwelling unit per 10 acres, 90% open space, and everything's on public and water. What I'll say there is nothing's changed. This is exactly as proposed now, but staff's saying it can't be supported now, but it could be supported then. So here's staff's analysis related to the inconsistency. They said in 2004, all the building envelopes were clustered near the road. And in 2018, if we move one building envelope away from the road, that results in no longer being clustered. So in red here shows the existing home on the remainder parcel there to the right. And it's about 500 feet from the roadway that was built as part of this subdivision. And staff determined that to be clustered near the road. So the yellow dot designates where we're proposing to move the building envelope to now. And staff is indicating that that's no longer clustered. Here's just a quick diagram showing red dots that are existing development and yellow dots that are proposed development in the designated building envelopes. This is what was approved in 2004, the three yellow dots. This is what's proposed now. And I would just ask the question, it's hard to see that purple circle, but I'd just ask the question, is that more clustered with surrounding development, which the code directs you to look at surrounding development, not just a development in a vacuum? Or is this more clustered? I would say that both are clustered. I think that they made the right decision in 2004 to approve it and find it consistent. I also think we're consistent now. When you read through, the reason for that, you read through the Development Code section 1846-060, and there's things in there that talk about allowing flexibility on a case-by-case basis. And this is related to clustering and open space. So flexibility on a case-by-case basis. That's important. Relating to the character of the surrounding development patterns, which we're doing. Building sites, and this is a clear distinction, this last one. There's a clear distinction in the code in multiple places that talk about clustering on large parcels versus clustering on small parcels. And then you could get into intense developments with a lot more lots versus just a few parcels. But there's definitely that distinction, and it says there parcels that are larger have larger buffers. So you can't take an exaggerated version of an exhibit and show 4 little dots and say, if we move one over here, it clearly isn't within our code. I agree. I agree that wouldn't be within the code, but you have to look at these not in a vacuum, but on a case-by-case. So what does the development code say about open space? There's all different types of open space. It says 7. I would venture to say there's probably more types. What type of open space do we have? Well, if you take the notes from the supplemental data sheet, what we have is a non-disturbance area that was created outside of the building envelopes. So you have the building envelopes taking up 10% of the site. The rest of the site is 90%. And outside of those building envelopes, you can do things such as horse corrals and other supporting structures. So in that area that staff shows a beautiful open space corridor, those could be structures there. They could have horse corrals. It's not mean that nothing can go there. It has to remain undisturbed. It just remains it's outside of the building envelope where you can put your house or secondary dwelling. So let's look at open space. First of all, this section deals with how much open space based on our zoning district. 90%. We're not changing that. We're keeping the same size building envelope, same dimensions. We're just moving it to the southwest to a much better location on the property. The next thing talks about permanent open space. And again, here's where the code differentiates between large subdivisions and small subdivisions. Says, quote, small subdivisions, 4 or less parcels, use of building envelopes must comply with required setbacks. We are doing that, so we're consistent with open space. Here's what town, I think, has based their whole argument of inconsistent with the general plan on this one diagram. They believe that this diagram clearly illustrates the intent of the general plan goals. This is not applicable for this subdivision. We have 4 lots. We don't have 10 to 30 dwellings, as it shows there that this is supposed to be used for. This is for a much different type of subdivision. You would have to completely disregard the development code when it talks about small parcels or small number of parcels, large lots, flexibility in design. You'd have to throw that out if you say that this is the only thing that makes you consistent with the general plan. We have a 5-acre, 10-acre, and 20-acre parcels. It's an average of 1 unit per 10 acres. Not 1 unit per acre that this diagram designates. As you can see in the far right, designation is 0.5 to 1 units per acre. We're 10 times that size. So the guidelines talk about flexibility on a case by case. I'll go through these quick because I know that town already touched on them and they're in the staff report. Clustering goals, they already went through that. Creating usable open space. This usable open space mainly talks about narrow strips of open space between parcels that shouldn't be counted. I completely agree. When you have a subdivision where you have 20 foot between buildings, you shouldn't count that open space because it's not truly open space. It's just counted to make your numbers work. But not the case in this large lot subdivision of 4 parcels. We have hundreds of feet between buildings and between building envelopes. So usable open space can go any which direction. Natural resources, I feel that staff's a little bit downplayed this on tree preservation, but this is one of the things under clustering and open space, talks about mature trees and groves. I would argue that our relocated building envelope better does that. We have a lot less trees. We'll probably impact 0 trees. I can't promise. Maybe it's 1, maybe it's 2, but most likely 0. In the other building envelope, we're probably going to impact 7 or 8 trees of over 24 inches. The code's clear on those sort of things about protecting that, and it's in the general plan and in the development code. So lastly, in the development code is proportionate clustering. Here's where it talks about relating to the character of the surrounding development patterns based on maximum zoning. And also, again, building sites on larger parcels have larger buffers than on smaller parcels. It's very clear distinction. So again, here's staff's analysis on that section, is that the building envelope location where we're moving it to would disrupt the continuous open space. And then they showed the diagram of the green going up north-south. I would argue that open space is not meant to go just north-south. And those 3 dots to the south on the very bottom are existing development. So I think it's a little disingenuous to show an open space corridor that stops right when the page ends. It doesn't go to the south. That's already existing development and then Glenshire Drive. Your valuable open space in this case is up in the RCOS. And then I show that it can also go east-west. If we move this building envelope, we're contiguous going north-south and east-west. Here's a blow-up of that showing distance between building envelopes and buildings, hundreds of feet. So you have north-south, you have east-west, you have the existing development to the south, and then my last argument there would be that contiguous open space can go any which direction. It shouldn't just be on a diagram that shows it going north-south. It can go north, south, east, west, diagonal, every which way. And we have hundreds of feet here going up along the golf course, in between the building envelopes, and to the north and to the west. So again, I conclude that both are consistent, both meaning the 2004 approval and the proposed building envelope relocation are both consistent with the development code. I believe that staff got it right in 2004, and I believe that to get it right in 2018, you would approve this project based on the code section talking about clustering goals, usable open space, natural resources, and proportionate clustering. So the last section I'll go over is findings. It really comes down to one finding. I think that staff agrees all the other findings were consistent with. So they listed in their staff report just one finding, and that's consistency with development code and general plan. I believe inherently if you're consistent with the development code, you're consistent with the general plan, because the development code wasn't written inconsistent with the general plan. And I think I've gone through all the code sections in the development code that we're consistent with when it relates to open space and clustering. So again, inherently we're consistent with the general plan, but these are the goals and policies that staff indicated that could not be found consistent. I disagree with all of them. You go through them and look at efficient development patterns, minimizing environmental impacts, threats to public safety. We're absolutely consistent with all of those. Here's the policies. I won't go through them again, but it mentions flexibility, establishing specific locations for structures, which we do because we have a designated building envelope, and then preserving open space, which we do. I think the biggest thing probably that staff pointed out was, again, that table LU7. I think that LU7 is completely inappropriate and doesn't apply to this project, because if you apply it to this project, you're saying that we have to have a clustered subdivision of 10 to 30 lots, 1 acre parcels. It's meant for a small acreage, large lot, large number of homes in a subdivision. And that does deserve a different type of clustering than large lots. As I pointed out in the development code, there's several areas that talk about a clear distinction between larger parcels and larger subdivisions. Same thing with this goal. We comply with it. We're consistent with the goals and policies in the open space as with the development code. So I'll flip through these quickly. Just a couple clarifications in the staff report, and then I'll wrap it up. So this kind of goes to the point that Jeff made about working with staff on finding a solution. But in the staff report, it mentioned that the applicant didn't find this to be a feasible option of moving all the building envelopes toward. We absolutely found it to be a feasible option. In fact, we thought that was a great idea that staff brought up, and we went to the owner immediately. There's one owner of the other 3 parcels at the time, Mary Bertolotti, used to be Mary Cheney. And she didn't want any part of it. We convinced her that wouldn't cost her any money, we would take care of it, we're just gonna move all the building envelopes towards the golf course, and she said no, she didn't want to go through the process. So we did try, we went through that process, and it just didn't work out. So I just wanted to point that out, that we did take that seriously as a feasible option, it just didn't work out. This one, I guess the last thing we were talking about was finding some middle ground with staff, and one of the things they talked about was they're in the process of updating their development code, and that we could possibly go a different route rather than to be here tonight for where we're at. But it was kind of an uncertain outcome for us. I mean, we're already almost a year into it. The outcome's uncertain, and we kind of felt like it would be starting over with not knowing where we're going, so we didn't go that route. The setbacks at Old Greenwood, I'll just say if anybody's interested in the history of that, of how that came about, it wasn't because of the homeowners association and it wasn't because of providing a corridor of open space. There was a lot of history with that with Cheney and with the map. I worked on that at the time with Old Greenwood, so I'll just leave it at that. It's kind of a long story, so if you want more information, feel free to ask me. Tree preservation and grading. The applicant justification in the staff report, it said that that was our justification, was tree preservation and reduction of grading. I just want to make it clear, it was not our primary justification. It was kind of an unintended consequence that was a good thing. We recognize, and as staff does, that the general plan thinks tree removal is an important thing. The development code also thinks tree preservation as an important thing, not tree removal. And we agree, but it wasn't our primary justification. Our primary justification is as we've outlined tonight and in our appeal justification. And the last thing I'll say before I summarize is the examples of clustering that staff put in the staff report I think are a little bit misleading because many of them are for higher density, smaller lot projects. And every project's different. Again, flexibility in the code. You can't look at things in a vacuum. You got to look at everything individually because every parcel's different. I could have gone through and probably found 15 or 20 more examples that show building envelopes further away from the road, different sizes, different locations. They're not all pretty and lined up by the road. It's often the case. So anyway, I'll leave it at that. And just I'll wrap this up in summary that I think that this was the wrong process. I think it's clear when you look at the government code and the development code, this process never should have been a new tentative map. This was not a subdivision. This is clear, as clear can be, that it should have been a certificate of correction or amended map, could have been handled at a staff level. I think the findings were inconsistently applied. It's hard for me to look at something that says you can be 500 feet away and we're going to call that clustered near the roadway, but if you move on the other side the same distance, you're no longer clustered near the roadway. Table LU7, which is really what you're being asked tonight to say that we're inconsistent with the general plan, and that's the whole basis of this hearing, I believe, is that we should be clustered near, like that diagram. I completely disagree. That's a diagram that's intended for larger subdivisions. It clearly says 10 to 30 lots. It clearly says maximum of one lot per acre. It's not applicable. Moving this building envelope is not going to create any negative impact to the environment. I think you could even argue that it's less of an impact to the environment if you think tree preservation is a good thing. But it's been downplayed in the staff report. Not sure why. No loss of large areas of open space by moving this. We have exactly the same. We have 90% open space. And I think it's a strong argument that we're not losing any contiguous open space. I know that contiguous open space is a big deal when you talk about clustering in open space. But if you only look at things north-south, then I think that's wrong. Contiguous could mean east-west, it could mean diagonal. There's lots of room. We're contiguous with every bit of open space all around each of these parcels, 360 degrees. And lastly, I think the finding tonight of consistency can easily be made. It's one finding, it's consistency with the general plan, and it really comes down to that chart of LU7 because I've gone over and over and over development code consistency, and again, I'd just like to state if we're consistent with the development code, we're inherently consistent with the general plan because the two go hand in hand. They're not inconsistent with each other. So with that, I really appreciate, I don't know how long I went, but I know I didn't go a minute per slide, so I did not go 54 minutes.
You're about 23 minutes, so
okay.
You're okay.
Thank you. Well, I appreciate the time, and I'm happy to answer any questions tonight that you have. Thanks.
All right. Thank you, Rob. Open this up for clarifying questions from council of either the applicant or staff.
I think I could guess, but one thing that we haven't talked about is where is the driveway? Is it coming from that road from the north on that parcel? Where's the access?
I think she'll pull it up on one of the slides. So the access comes off of an old Greenwood Road. Forget the name of it, but that comes. So the access is through Old Greenwood and then down the center of the project. I had a purple dashed line.
Horizon Drive.
So that doesn't show it, but it's the lines that separate the 3 parcels on the left and the right. Is that your question, or further north, you want to know where it connects?
Well, both. Just because my follow-up question is, so much of this is about open space, wondering, I guess we're, with either plan, you're already assuming that open space sort of crosses the roads and the driveways, so adding a driveway doesn't change either party's definition of open space corridors.
Correct. The definition on the supplemental map, you could pull up that note. It talks about that everything outside of the building envelope is considered open space, which includes driveways, even the horse corrals, the other structures, that's still considered open space.
Staff, anything? See nods.
Driveways are allowed outside the building envelope, but that's pretty standard with subdivisions. I think we think that having an open space area that has no roadways or driveways would obviously be probably preferable for wildlife to have no interference, but that is something that's allowed.
Yeah. And then for staff, the structure on the 20-acre parcel, was that built before the tentative map was recorded?
Yes. That's why the clustering is a little bit different on that parcel, because it's significantly larger and had an existing residence.
And so the building envelope on the large parcel essentially was recognizing the existing conditions and not...
Right.
However, the road wasn't put in yet, so the road could have been put close to that building or further away from the building. It was chose to put 500 feet from that building.
And then sort of a similar history question, I don't know if we have it handy, but for the parcels below here, the Hansford Bean, Skeekerveer, were those, did those have tentative maps? Were those buildings built before we had the clustering as the general plan guidelines? I know we're going back a little ways here.
Yeah, my recollection, those parcels had been around well before we even looked at this Cheney map. So if the Cheney map was from 2004, those had all been pretty well established ahead of time. And the Cheney one was, like you said, you called it out, that the house was already there. And so in working with the Cheneys to come up with clustering at the time, they were trying to work with some of the existing road cuts that were already there in the location of the house.
All right, keep going. So you talked a lot about table LU7. Am I correct that LU7 has 4 different types of clustered developments on it? The staff
Yes.
report, I see 4.
Yes.
You've mentioned 1.
Well, I mentioned 1 because staff mentioned 1. In the staff report, they say that the one that's applicable is the one that's 10 to 30 lots, 1-acre parcels, because it's in the OSR zoning district. I would contend that diagram doesn't apply whatsoever. It's not even close to the type of subdivision that we have. And then you would have to assume that the code that says it's different for large parcels of having larger buffers, you got to completely throw that out.
So staff, how does the designation of OSR versus RC affect the clustering? Like, does it matter what the designation or zoning is to how we apply clustering? Like,
Yeah, so if you look at the table where it says applicable land use designation, it talks about the type of land use designation, and then that dictates the type of clustering. So it's based on the land use designation, not on the size of the subdivision or number of parcels. And I think that's been our interpretation of this part of the general plan.
so the land use designation is, sorry, this is going back to basics, but zoning overlay?
That's the general plan land use designation. So when you look at the general plan land use map, the one that has all the different colors, that's what it's referencing. So you would pull out that general plan land use map and you would go find whatever that land use designation is for that property and then backfill from the chart.
So I'm sure there's plenty of places in town where the general plan designation does not match the average parcel size. It's sort of weird that these are sort of linked together in this.
Yeah, that's true.
Okay. Just a couple more here. So we talked about the easement on the lot just below this one changing, and it says that the utility easement changed, and that caused the building envelope to change places.
Correct.
And so, to me, that seems like a different kind of, that's a sort of external change imposed in the parcel as opposed to where we want to build, what's our choice for home site. So to me, those are two different things. I heard you kind of saying that they were the same type of change. Can you just clarify your view on that?
Sure. It's the same change because the code is clear that when you change, it even says in the development code, when you change things like easement location, road location, or parcel configuration, that you have to go back. It actually states that you go back for a new tentative map. But in this case, they moved an easement, then changed the building envelope accordingly, and made it a staff level change, did not require a new tentative map. I'm not saying that was an incorrect process. I think that changes happen all the time after you get an approval. Minor changes, and I would constitute that as a minor change. But I would also constitute as moving a building envelope to a preferable location on the building site if you still meet the code, if you don't have environmental impacts, as also a minor change. So that's my point is, at one point in 2004, it was okay to be a staff level change, and 2018, now we have to make you do a new tentative map.
All right, but what I hear staff saying is that one of those is an externally imposed factor as opposed to a property decision.
I can't speak for whether that was or wasn't, because it could have been just a developer's decision to move it and change it to save money. I don't know if it was an external change that couldn't have been, that just happened, or if it was a direct choice to save money or redesign it.
So the change in the easement could have actually come from the property owner saying, we want to do this
Most likely it did. To me, it looks like it was a shorter shot, and it would have been something that, why don't we go up this way because we're going to save money.
Can we get some clarification on that, maybe? Did you guys know?
So there's a process difference in that we amended this section of the development code for modifications to recorded maps in 2017 to take away the staff discretion and really limit it to technicalities of a map. Like you did a wrong meets and bounds, you had something that was very technical on the map that was wrong, and that's the type of stuff that can now be reviewed as a correction at the staff level, where in 2004, or prior to this change, staff was doing much more sort of review of stuff at the staff level and ability to make some of those modifications. So from what I understand, these are two different timeframes where the development code language was actually different about what staff's discretion was to review changes.
And I'm just looking at the language in place today. I don't know what it said in 2004, but if you look at the code today, and take a strict interpretation of it, it would say that if you're moving an easement and you're changing a building envelope, you have to go back and do that process.
Gotcha. Thank you. Those are all my questions. Although I have a sort of general question for our planning commissioner of the time to add to your context, however you want to jump in with that.
Yeah, let me maybe ask some questions first and get through that, and then we'll frame it up after the fact. I actually have some questions for Mr. Glassner, and you're welcome to answer them if you wish. But when was the property purchased by the current owner?
I believe 2017.
2017. And were these restrictions on the building envelope known at the time? I assume they were presented under the disclosure statements during the sale? Sorry, if you're gonna answer, come on up and give us an answer.
So I don't know that he was aware of what the restrictions were, but it was on a recorded map that showed the building envelope. But he went out to the site, walked the site, fell in love with the property, and said, "Man, this is the ideal place to build my house." There was an easement in place from the golf course that was 150-foot setback for buildings, 100-foot for patios. And he approached the new owner of the golf course. It had changed hands since the original agreement had been put in place. And they were willing to revise the agreement for his property. And so they did, and a new agreement was recorded that allowed him to build closer than the 150, build actually 50 feet instead of 150.
And that's provided to us in the staff report, or that it's irrelevant to this conversation because
I think it's relevant because it's a recorded document, and it should be part of the packet. It was submitted. It's a signed document that was submitted as part of our original application.
So, I mean, I'm just trying to wrap my head around how we got here, I guess, and the reality that I think you just answered was that there just wasn't sufficient homework done on the purchase. I mean, it sounds like the buyer wasn't aware that a building envelope existed.
I don't think it has anything to do with that homework wasn't done. I think that there's a process in place when you make changes such as this, and it's fairly commonplace. I've probably throughout my 20-year career doing planning, I've probably done this 10 or 15 times where somebody wants to change a setback, change a note on the map, change a building envelope, and it's pretty commonplace, and that's why the government code allows you to amend a map and make it easy, because it's a supplemental part of the map. It's not a correction, it's just a change, and so you have to make sure you meet the code of whatever jurisdiction you're working in this case, the town of Truckee, but we believe we do. So it's not uncommon practice to do it.
I guess I'm not inferring that it's a common or uncommon practice. That doesn't.
And I'm just saying me. I don't know if it was by lack of homework or if it was more looking at the site closer and saying this is really the ideal place to build. This is a great location. And as you can see when I put that picture up, it's a flat part of the site, no trees. It's perfect.
So what you just said is also a subjective statement, similar to what you're referring to as the clustering policy being subjective, basically. Would that be accurate?
Sure.
I mean, just because he thinks it's a good place to build there, but yet the building envelope was set there, I mean, that's somewhat subjective in terms of, the building envelope was set for a purpose, and now we're being asked to reset something based on a subjective property owner, right, and break up that what we think is or what the general plan defines as clustering.
I would say that it's somewhat subjective, yes, but I would also say that there's flexibility in the code to make those subjective determinations as long as you can meet the development code and general plan policies, which I strongly believe we do.
And then I think my last question, I don't know if you came prepared for this one, because I believe it came up in our planning commission deliberations with regards to saving the trees and the driveways and the open space and all of that. But I believe a question was asked regarding, driveway and length of driveway and amount of pavement and environmental impact of significantly longer driveway, and we're going to have to avoid trees, and we can only have certain curves. I don't believe you answered it from my recollection at the Planning Commission hearing, but are you prepared to come with that?
I mean, we've looked at it a lot closer now with a design on that specific site, and I believe we would design it with the loss of no trees. Driveways are easy to design around trees. Also, this is a fairly flat site. It's easy to design a driveway at grade, so we're not talking about large cuts and fills. We're talking about putting a driveway at grade, 12-foot wide, meander around trees. I know Frank wants to keep those trees. It's a beautiful site with beautiful trees. So I would say that we can easily design a driveway around the trees and have a lot less impact than we would if it stays where it's at.
And my last question, other than maybe process and wanting to deal with paperwork, were there any other reasons given by Mary Cheney as to why she wasn't interested in relooking at all the building envelopes as a whole?
I can't really speak for Mary. My interpretation of reading between the lines is she was a little bit scared of the process. She thought that it would open up a can of worms, and she had some interest in maybe selling one of the other parcels, and that might delay things and that the process could be dragged out. She kind of saw what we were going through already and said, I don't have any interest in getting involved. And we assured her it wouldn't cost her money, we would take care of all the headache stuff, and she said, nah, I'm not interested.
Thank you. Yeah.
Okay, I've got a number of questions for the applicant and then some for staff. So for the applicant, what is the size of the home, the footprint of the actual home being contemplated compared to the footprint, the size of the footprint of the envelope?
Much, much smaller. The envelope, I believe, is half an acre, so it's 20-something thousand square feet.
Right.
The home that's been designed, I believe, is a little over 4,000 square feet.
So it's a single level, it'd be 4,000 square foot of a footprint?
I'll let him explain the home, but I knew the size. I don't know the other.
Okay.
It's a split-level home, excuse me, that's done up by Sandbox Design. It's 4,166 feet and makes vertical use and horizontal use to have it just blend right into the landscape.
Okay, so the envelope is roughly 21,000 square feet, the building envelope, but the actual footprint of the building is around 4,000 or so.
Yes, Mr.
So
Chair.
a fraction of the envelope itself.
Yes, sir.
Okay. And Mr. Glasner, since you're here, you talked about some considerable expenses, over $100,000 of expenses. Were those all related to this particular process, or are you just talking about all of your expenses to date?
No, this particular process. The legal fees, the land planning fees, the fees from the town, et cetera.
Okay, so over 100,000.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I think that's all I had for you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yep. And then, let's see. I think we've talked about the trees. It sounds like there's, your assessment is fewer trees removed with the relocation of the envelope versus the original location?
Absolutely, fewer.
Okay. So, Rob, you mentioned that moving an envelope should be considered just a correction, basically a correction. Could you sort of elaborate again on that? I think you touched on that, but I want to make sure I clearly understand why you think this is should be categorized as a correction.
Yeah, and I wouldn't say that's my opinion. That's the opinion of the government code and the development code. So there's clear definition in both codes that when you change something on the supplemental data sheet, such as building setbacks and building envelopes, that it is done by certificate of correction or amended map. A certificate of correction is a simple process that you just explain what the change is, and you do a corresponding exhibit. It's run by the town or county surveyor, and it's recorded, so that if somebody buys that they see that title changed, that something changed with the recordation. In this case, the building envelope. So, not my opinion, but the code's opinion.
Okay, thank you. Let me make sure. And then I guess just going back, I think I understand the reason why the desire to move this envelope all the way to the edge was just basically based on your assessment of the site and what would make the best location for locating your home. So that was the determination for this
correct
location. Okay, thank you. And then I've got some questions for staff. So the purpose of what, I think I know the answer to this, but the purpose of clustering, the whole concept of clustering, what in simple terms, what's the purpose behind that?
I'll just take that one. The objective generally of clustering is to provide contiguous and as large as one can get at swaths of open land.
So open space.
Usually for a particular purpose or multiple purposes, such as habitat or watershed land or viewshed. In this case, it appears that the purpose, there's no direct record of exactly what it was, but is to have a large bit of open space between the golf course and the buildings, and to put the buildings closest to the road as you could. The new buildings, recognizing the existing building was already there.
Okay.
Does that seem about right? Yeah.
Okay, thank you. And then the building envelope, again, I think we covered this, but it's 10% of the total lot area. So we've got a 5-acre lot, 210,000 square feet, 10% of that, 21,000, so 10%, and then 90% would be considered open space. Correct, okay. And then just a question, so it occurred to me that there was a final map recorded which created this there originally was a tentative map, and then tentative obviously it means what it means. It's tentative until it becomes final, and then that map records and these parcels are created. So that part was a little confusing to me, since there is a final map already, and the parcel boundaries aren't being proposed. There are no changes being proposed to the parcel boundaries. Why the new tentative map when it doesn't entail changing anything in terms of the perimeter of the property? So
That's a good question. That's something we've definitely been looking at in terms of what the right process or the best possible process could be for these kinds of modifications. Like Rob said, we've had some discussions. We actually took some suggested code language to Planning Commission, and they were in favor of it, but we haven't brought it to council. We're still trying to figure out the right approach. The town surveyor gave us an opinion on not using a certificate of correction or an amended map for building envelope relocations, because in his opinion, that's not appropriate. It's not a correction, it's not an error. And based on his knowledge, that he didn't think that was the right process to use. So we're looking at other options, but what's in the code right now says that if it's not an omission or error, a physical change, then the tentative map is the process. And so that's the process we followed.
Can I just say one thing too? Well, go ahead, and then
So one way to perhaps look at the idea of the building envelope, though, is to think of it almost as a condition. It is not a written condition as we're used to seeing, but it is a graphic condition. It's essentially saying, we, the town, approve this tentative map and ultimately set of final maps, or final map, with the notion of certain things that we expect to see, one of which is a building envelope. If you take the logic of what I'm understanding that Rob is saying, then anyone in that subdivision or any other subdivision that has building envelopes who simply asks to move the building envelope, we would be obliged ministerially to do so, in which case one has to ask the question, why would there be building envelopes to cluster in the first place? If it's an automatic staff decision to do so, it seems like the notion of a building envelope is, it's only meaningful in that it constrains it to 10%, but actually putting it somewhere isn't meaningful. And I guess that's the part I have a hard time with that logic. I'm not trying to sway this one way or the other, but that's where the logic where I'm not quite getting at. The other part of the logic I'm not quite getting is that had we started with the staff determination, but the staff had said, no, we don't think this is appropriate because it's inconsistent, it would have been appealed anyway, actually twice, once to the Planning Commission, once to you. So I'm not sure that would have necessarily solved the problem. I get the difference in criteria that you talked about. Anyway, those are just two kind of sidebar comments that I'll stay.
Okay, thanks.
I guess just quickly on that last point, if it wasn't a new tentative map, then you wouldn't have those findings, and it wouldn't have been denied based on those findings at Planning Commission. But I just wanted to point out on Laura's comment on the code that the town attorney found that the code language says that that's the process only for corrections. That's not the case. I showed on my presentation. It's very clear. The government code says supplemental information may be amended by certificate of correction. Then you go to the development code, 1898-140A, and it says to amend corrections or other corrections that are necessary or other changes that are necessary. Those other changes, there's a clear distinction between corrections and other things that necessary changes. Those necessary changes are supplemental data. So the code, as written right now, the development code and the government code, which mandates how you do these things for parcel maps and final maps, is very, very clear.
So what are the necessary changes versus the desired changes? What is necessary?
Well, it's a necessary change. If you want to move a building envelope, it's necessary to document that via certificate of correction so that it changes the title. So it's a necessary change. It doesn't mean that you have to make that change. It just says if you make that change, it's necessary to go through the process of either a new tentative map, but in this case it says certificate of correction or amended map.
Okay.
I mean, you could probably, I would grant you that you could probably wordsmith and look at the development code that way, because that's a little more confusing with the word necessary. But when you look at the government code, it's as clear as can be. It even states the section. It says per 66434.2, which deals with supplemental data. This is how you deal with that. When you change that, you do certificate of correction, and that's what we're doing. And that was the process. But I just want to be clear, process aside, we still believe strongly that we can meet the consistency of the general plan. Otherwise, I wouldn't be here. I wouldn't be fighting for this if I didn't think we could. So process aside, we went through it. I threw that out there because I didn't think it was fair to be pushed down that process. I think staff even kind of agrees that maybe there's that gray area we shouldn't have. That's why they're trying to change their code. But process aside, I believe we're consistent with the general plan, and we're certainly consistent with the development code, which is also consistent with the general plan.
Okay, thank you. I had one last question for staff, and this is kind of a general question. When we look at diagrams like this, and when subdivisions are generated and building envelopes are put onto a map, what exactly is the process for that? Is someone going out, walking the site, looking at the features, or is it really sort of a survey or map sort of exercise? Is there any guidance on how that process comes about, or what that process looks like in terms of locating building envelopes?
So oftentimes when a tentative map is submitted, the applicants already know where they would like to put building envelopes, but we do as staff go out and look at the location of those building envelopes to verify if there's any other site constraints that weren't taken into consideration, things that we even project and see, if there's a giant rock outcropping that would somehow impact future ability to build. Those are things that we look for, make sure that the slopes are they're captured on the map, things like that. So it may come in with a set design, but through our review of the code and going out and looking at it, they may get modified through that process before it's finally approved.
Okay, so it sounds like there is a component of a field, visit. It's not purely lines on a map in a room.
And that's exactly what happened with this one. I happened to have been the planner at the time for the Cheney map, and I have memories of being out on site with Mary, walking it and looking at the different locations, because Old Greenwood was just starting to be under construction at that time. So, I was out there in the town car, kind of going back and forth between Glenshire Drive and what now is Overland Trail, finding the locations of all these different spots to look at it in the context of, yes, it's a two-dimensional map, but it's 3D when you're out there.
And in addition, in this particular application, not only did your planning staff go out a number of times and a number of times with the development team, but so did your town manager and your town attorney. So we spent quite a bit of time sort of kicking the dirt here.
I think it's important to note that everybody went out there after the denial. I mean, that was when everybody went out there, because before then, I don't think
no, that's
anybody.
actually not true. We went out before.
I went out there too, actually, before the planning commission hearing.
Okay, I also went out there.
I hope it wasn't just in the last couple of days, because you wouldn't have seen much in the last couple of days.
I actually went out there last summer when this was originally, I think, on our docket, on our schedule, and then it didn't happen, but I went out prior to the So I think it was August or so, maybe August, September, something like that. So yeah,
That's great. I think that's important.
Got to see it. Okay, well those are my questions. Any other questions before we open this up for public comment? Okay.
Mayor Tierman, could I just chime in with something real quickly? Thank you. I think where some of the debate or maybe disagreement is happening is with that government code section that Mr. Wood referenced earlier, section 66469. Our interpretation of that code is that it really relates to corrections or mistakes that were made with recordation of the final map, or errors or omissions. When you look at all the different options that are available, and there's letters A through G, none of those relate to what we are calling this, which is a change to the final map, not a correction. And they appear to be taking a different interpretation, that a change can be construed as a correction. We have not taken that position. We see that this is a change which falls outside the parameters established by this code.
Okay, thank you, Jenna. Okay, with that, we will open this up to public comment. We have one member of the public here tonight. No, okay. All right, so we'll close public comment and bring this back to council for deliberations. And Dave, maybe this is that opportunity to talk about your experience on the planning commission, or whoever wants to open this up.
Sure. I think, we spent quite a bit of time on this on the Planning Commission, and I think at the end of the day, we all understand that time and money goes into these processes. We understand all that, and we're certainly at this level. We are not. We're here to uphold policy that's been put in place at the end of the day. And I think there were a couple overriding factors that the Planning Commission deliberated. And I think both Jeff and Jenna really sort of highlighted two of the main ones. Jenna, where she previously just talked about, and that's really what I was trying to get at in my questioning of the appellant, which was, what are the necessary corrections that needed to be made? And I think it's a fuzzy area, but I think the way that Jenna explained it is very clear in that, if there was a correction, if there was a mistake, those are all things that can be fixed quickly and by staff. And this is not that case. I think to Jeff's other point of, we move a building envelope here, we move a building envelope there, and we're creating precedent, and then all of a sudden every building envelope in town gets to get moved with all sorts of different reasoning. And so at least at the Planning Commission level, that's, we're very focused, we're very tight on at what we are talking about. And I think those were two of the main issues, and we just couldn't make the findings that allowed us to move this forward in that sense, was really where we came from. The trees were a really big issue. We went back and forth on trees for hours, I feel like, and driveway lengths, and contiguous open space, and they're subjective. And again, I wish we had an overlay of current building envelope with how many trees we're going to get taken down to proposed building envelope with extended driveway with how many trees we're going to get taken down. We didn't have that graphic, so we're relying on a bit of hearsay. I walked the property too last summer. There weren't lines of the building envelope drawn on the property, so I couldn't tell how many trees were going to get taken down. So I kind of threw that argument out personally. If it was a genuine argument, we'd have two overhead slides showing us exactly, what that looks like, in my opinion. So that's sort of where I'm at. I'm interested to hear what you guys have to say at the higher level. I'm the new guy on the block up here, so coming from my Planning Commission background, that's where I come from. This is a slightly different opportunity, and an appeal is a serious matter. So I'm open to conversation.
This is fascinating. I feel like we could brew a cup of coffee and just kind of keep at this for a while, because there's a lot to pour through. I think that the process questions I'm kind of less interested in, to be honest, partly because our town attorney's out sick right now, partly because those seem a little bit secondary and more nuanced, and I think thirdly because kind of regardless of what the process is to get to this point, now we're here. And I believe as an appeal, this is de novo, as we'd say. And so the bigger question is what's going on. I mean, I'm certainly open to other viewpoints on this, but from what I've seen, I'm kind of inclined to side the private landowner. I see two proposals of roughly roughly equivalent kind of preservations of open space, of clustering, of kind of consistency of setbacks, looking at the larger development pattern. And while I think it might be possible to say that one is slightly better than the other, to me, the amount of hair splitting and time that we're doing to try and say this one is sort of consistent and this one is inconsistent doesn't seem to weigh that. And Jeff, I hear you on and I don't think that the process should be at the staff level. Anytime someone wants to correct a building envelope and move it, that staff has to approve that. I don't think that going down this road would kind of set that precedent. Rather, what I see is somebody who, there's a lot of important things we work on in the town. Helping looking at the case of one landowner on a single family lot building a home is hardly the kind of, big tough stuff the town is trying to fight to preserve. And I see someone who's put in a lot of work and is kind of offering something that's roughly equivalent. And so I'm not sure that I have the kind of wherewithal to say that this one is better than the other for the open space goals and the kind of clustering goals. And again, want to reiterate, I don't think it's wrong that staff didn't just approve this. I don't think it's wrong that we've kind of reached at this point, right? Staff is not here to bend the rules. That is why you kind of put up some obstacles to make that hard to happen. But I'm newer at this project, so I'm gonna miss something.
All right, thanks. Yeah, I have some mixed views. I certainly appreciate the degree of effort that staff has put into this and research, and same token, I appreciate the degree of work that the applicant has put into this. So I think, wow, disproportionate to, I think, the issue at hand, to be honest. And I always try to look at these things through a pragmatic lens and sort of keep a bigger perspective here in mind. I agree with staff in terms of the interpretation about whether this is a correction or not. I don't look at this as a correction. I look at this simply as a landowner who has a large 5-acre parcel who wants to build his house in the best possible location on that lot. I mean, I think it's as simple as that. And so the rub becomes, does that location jive with our general plan policies and our notions of clustering? And I start thinking about, well, clustering, and I ask the question, what is the ultimate goal and purpose of it? And it's to preserve open space. And, here we have an envelope that's 10% of the lot. So by virtue of that, we have 90% of the lot as open space already. And then if you dial in even further and zoom in on, well, what's the actual building footprint? I think the architect, Mr. Gillespie, provided some comments earlier today, and that footprint is even smaller than the envelope. It's around 4,000 or maybe 3,000 or 4,000 square feet. So we're talking about 2%. Really, 2% of the lot is being built, and then the driveway. And again, a large 5-acre parcel. So I struggle a little bit with the notion of cluster when you're talking about 10 and 5-acre parcels, which is a lot of land. Kind of where I end up or land on this is probably a bit more aligned with Morgan, thinking that, gosh, we put a lot of effort into something here. Staff has, the applicant. There's been a lot of money spent, and looking at this sort of aerial view, the 10,000 foot above. And you can see, some home footprints from the existing neighborhood to the south, the Hansford property, et cetera. And you can really see how relatively small those footprints are and how much open space there really is. And so I agree there needs to be a process. I agree that this isn't just something that anyone comes in and says, I want to move my envelope. I believe in the process, and I think there has to be a process. And maybe this was the right process going to Planning Commission. But where I am today would be, more empathetic with the desire of a landowner to place a house where he wants the house, where he thinks it works best. Part of that is my training as well as an architect. So I'll have to confess to that. One of the first things I would do is go out to the site, assess the conditions, the solar orientation, the views, the topography, the tree cover, and determine the best location for building. I mean, that's just sort of a fundamental. So, So I don't know. It's sounding like we may have a. Let's just do it. Yeah.
Well, okay.
Yeah.
We need
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
Well.
So I believe, and we're in uncharted territory here because we only have 3 council members to pass the resolution that's in front of you, which right now I'm not hearing support for that, would require 3 affirmative votes. I think we've been pretty clear about that. We've faced this one before a couple times when a couple council members were not present. The alternative would be to. You could simply I believe you could take a policy vote here, which would essentially, it's a policy interpretation vote, I guess would be one way of looking at it, in which case it wouldn't be a resolution, and you'd be taking that policy interpretation vote to, I'm on shaky ground here. I wish my colleague, Mr. Morris, was
Don't we have another slide of?
Yeah, can you just go to the next slide?
So this one suggests a different tactic, which is to send us back. And I mean, again, 2 options here. One, you could continue until there's a full council. Of course, that's one way, and then it's a lot easier to get 3 for votes for anything. The second option here would be to say it appears you're heading in a direction of wanting to approve the appeal, overturn the commission's decision, and then we would come back to you with a resolution to that effect and some findings. That would also require 3 votes. That coming back to you, because again, the resolution is what puts the 3 votes in there. So that probably would be the cleanest and safest way to go. It requires coming back again to presumably a full council at that point to get 3 affirmative votes for a resolution.
Yeah, and I think if I remember from our conversation earlier, probably as a consent item, and I don't see a lot of people kind of lining up to oppose this. I only have one comment from a landowner, but to me, my understanding is that our action tonight would say, go prepare the new tentative map of the building envelope and bring it back to council so that then this gets resolved. Is that not your understanding of the process?
So if we have,
We're checking with Andy if he's still with us mentally.
He's with us virtually. at the
okay,
moment.
so I think we may have 3 affirmative votes here tonight for some, I don't know. I think we may.
The straw poll is such.
The straw poll is indicating that right
But
now.
there are 3 affirmative votes for a set of.
Find merit in the appeal, and we wish to approve. We wish that you could prepare a revised resolution and come back to a future council meeting with modified documents.
Yeah, and that actually, I don't think that would actually require 3 affirmative votes because it's not technically a resolution, but it will help because when it comes back, you at least know you have 3 affirmative votes.
The thing, though, I want to make sure we're not coming back and redoing this whole thing again. That's
Why can't we just
right?
take action and approve the appeal and overturn the commission action? We find that the project is I make a motion that we find that the
You
project
could do that without adopting a resolution, or if you're all in alignment this evening on granting the appeal and overturning the commission's decision,
Right.
you can do that as well.
Yep.
Okay, without a resolution.
Correct.
Correct.
Okay.
But you would need to make a very clear motion according to the town attorney.
Okay, so in terms of a clear motion, didn't we have an option on one of the slides that sort of?
Yes, I believe it's up. It's the kind of the lower, as I think of it, it's kind of the lower paragraph.
Okay.
You're approving the appeal, overturning the commission action, recommending exemption from CEQA guidelines, and then, and whether we would come back to you with a formal resolution to codify that, or with the map or not. We'll let it give us a chance to figure that out. If there's are 3 affirmed votes for that, I think then because I am a little concerned that the other 2 members of council wouldn't have been part of this, and could be some discomfort in jumping into something they weren't a part of. So,
Yeah.
But anyway, so I think we can do that.
So the town attorney stated you could grant the appeal, direct staff to prepare a map amending the envelope to be considered by council at a future meeting.
Okay.
Yep.
All right.
So I would move that we grant the appeal and direct staff to prepare a new map that would be approved by council at a later date.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay, so it passes and, yep.
Yep. Thank you, Andy.
All right, thank you, Andy, virtually. Hope you feel better. Okay. So I think we are at the point of council reports.
Indeed.
Vice Mayor Goodwin.
I wrote them down ahead of time.
Okay.
Not going to be caught flat-footed again. For all of our audience here, I joined a few of you and our planning commissioners at our land use planning workshop last week, which I thought had some good nuggets of insight. I also sat with some members from the Mountain Housing Council for an interview process for a consultant team that is going to be working on a memo recommending sort of next steps for the Mountain Housing Council. So what does the entity look like when the Mountain Housing Council finishes its 3-year scope of work? And that was, I thought, a really good conversation. We had, Richard Anderson from Navajo County, Lindsay Romack from Placer County, John Hester with North Lake Tahoe Resort Association. I think I'm getting that right. TRPA. Thank you. Really good conversation and unanimous agreement that I think we picked the team that has, that we felt had the most ability to bring dynamic, creative, innovative solutions. We didn't just want a sort of cookie cutter, what's been done before. Had lunch with one of our 100% clean energy leaders, Deirdre Henderson, talking about the town's process towards realizing that goal. And also had lunch with another new promising housing developer named Scott Earhart, who's looking at building a large kind of workforce locals housing development. So adding that to the list of projects our staff is going to be working on. I think that's it.
Yeah, Land Use 101, I attended that. I also I met with Perry Norris and some of the homeowners over in the Donner Lake West End area about some parking issues and recreational access issues, looking towards some solutions there. Also met with Perry about some land trust activities that they've got going on that could impact some future properties and things like that around town. What else happened? I believe that's it. Lots of meetings with Perry and other recreation users at the moment. And I will also say I didn't go to Sacramento, but spent some time lobbying through the Outdoor Industry Association lobbyist in Sacramento about an Office of Sustainable Outdoor Recreation at the state level. And I'm also proud to say that the public lands package passed the House today and is on to President Trump's desk in the near future, which is really exciting. It's a really cool bill. So
Great updates. Sorry I missed Land Use CEQA 101. I was under the weather that day, but I really was. Susie, you were there too, right? Yeah. All right. So anyway, on February 21, Jeff Lux and I drove down to Nevada City and had a mayor's breakfast, and town manager breakfast with our cohorts in Nevada City and Grass Valley. And then later that day, delivered a State of the Town update to the Truckee Rotary Club. And then on February 25th, yesterday, attended the Sister City Committee meeting. As you heard earlier, we were making some good progress, and yeah, that's it. So with that, we'll adjourn the meeting, and thank you, everybody, for everything tonight. So.